The first thing he feels is the wind, free of ash. The wind blows from the east, and there is neither burnt bone nor sulfur in it. He stands knee-deep in wet grass. The grass is soft. It's been a long time since he's felt anything soft. Above his head is an empty gray sky, and there isn't a single crack in it. He looks up for too long. His eyes can't bear such simplicity and begin to water. He lowers his head and takes a step. The ground gives way beneath his heel. The turf bursts open all around him. A crater 3 steps wide and waist deep remains in the grass. He freezes on one leg. He didn't strike, he simply stepped. He lowers his other foot slowly, as if into boiling water. The ground holds him. He stands and listens to his body. His body hums. It's used to pushing off against a rock that weighs like a mountain. Here, there's nothing to push off from. Everything here is soft. He remembers how, in Yaris, he learned to absorb the Lord's blow with 3 fingers. Back then, he thought the worst thing was not being able to withstand the pressure. Now he understands that the worst thing is not being able to withstand the emptiness. He calls it a leash to himself. He must put himself on a leash and not let go of it even a finger's width. He takes a second step. The turf cracks but holds. He walks toward the road and counts his steps. On the 40th step, he steps onto the asphalt. The asphalt crunches beneath him like snow crust. He walks along the shoulder, leaving a trail of dents behind him. A car drives by. He doesn't move. He watches it disappear around the bend and realizes he doesn't remember the sound of an engine. He remembers the roar of the tiered furnaces. He remembers the scream that lasts for a day. The sound of the engine seems childish to him. He walks on. There are numbers and letters on the sign. He reads them, and the letters don't fall into place right away. He keeps track on a bone. The bone lies in his leather pouch. It is the femur of a 3rd-tier titan, and it bears 1,000 notches. He made 1 notch when the sky above the tiered lands turned red. The red sky came once a year. He checked it 10 times before believing it. 1,000 notches mean 1,000 years. He touches the pouch with his palm. The pouch falls apart into shreds. The bone falls onto the asphalt and doesn't break. He picks it up carefully with 2 fingers. He holds it the way one would hold a baby bird. Then he carries it in his hand. An hour later, the road leads him to a cordoned-off area. Red posts, a fence, people in plain gray jackets. Behind the fence, in the field, stands a crater. The crater is dead and covered with a crust. He stops and stares at it for a long time. He recognizes this crust. A crust like this forms on that side when the passage is sealed from the outside. So he wasn't thrown out here. So he was thrown out nearby. The people in jackets are the first to notice him. Someone shouts. 3 of them are coming toward him. The one in front has a badge with 7 stripes on his shoulder. He sees those stripes and an old memory surfaces in his mind. 7 stripes mean the 7th rank, the lowest one. They gave him the same one when he used to haul other people's bags for the raid party. He was a porter. He remembers it as if it were someone else's belongings found in his pocket. The one in front asks who he is and where he's coming from. He replies that he came out of the crater. The one in front says that crater has been sealed for 11 years. He replies that he didn't come out of that one. Then the second hunter grabs him by the shoulder. He feels the stranger's fingers and realizes that things are about to go badly. He doesn't move. He just stands there. The hunter pulls him toward himself, and the hunter flies backward 4 steps and falls onto his back. No one understood what had happened. He didn't understand it himself. He hadn't tensed his arm. He just hadn't given in. The one in front grabs his radio. 20 minutes later, they put him in a car. The car sags on its springs as he sinks into the seat. The driver looks in the mirror and says nothing. They're taking him into the city. He doesn't recognize the city. The buildings are taller than he remembers. Screens hang over the streets. On the screens are faces and numbers, and the faces are smiling. He looks at these faces and can't understand how anyone can smile with such an empty expression. In the layers, only those who were about to eat smiled. The car stops at a long gray building. Above the entrance, a sign reads Measurement Station. Inside, it smells of paper and metal. They lead him down a hallway. There's a line in the hallway. There are teenagers and adults in the line, and they're all holding blue cards. He walks past, and the line falls silent. He doesn't know why. He sees his reflection in the glass and realizes why. He has a scar running across his entire neck. He's wearing his own skin instead of clothes. He's holding a bone in his hand. They lead him into the hall. In the center of the hall stands a measuring column. The column is twice his height, and it hums steadily. An operator sits at a desk. The operator has gray stubble and a weary face, and his name tag reads Soren Das. Soren Das doesn't look at him. Soren Das says he needs to remove all metal, step into the circle, and place his palm on the plate. He takes off his leather belt. The belt remains in his hand in two pieces. Soren Das looks up and then looks down again. He steps into the circle. He places his palm on the plate. He does this more carefully than he has ever done anything before. The column hums. The column increases in pitch. The numbers on the panel creep upward. 300, 600, 1,000. 1,000 is the top of the scale. The numbers reach 1,000 and fade. The panel shows 0. Soren Das frowns and slaps the panel with his palm. The column hums again. 1,000 again. 0 again. On the third try, the column stops humming altogether. Soren Das stands up and walks around the column. He says the device is broken and that this happens once a year. He says that's it for today's measurements. The assistant behind the counter says they checked the column this morning. Soren Das replies that they must not have checked it properly. Then Soren Das looks at the man in the circle. He stares for a long time. He sees torn skin. He sees a bone in the hand. He sees thin wrists. And he decides what anyone in his place would decide. He says that the person before him is an empty. An empty is someone who has not a single share. There are thousands of them across the country. They aren't accepted into the guild, and they aren't allowed into the funnels deeper than the first hall. Soren Das issues a temporary pass and stamps it with a no rank mark. He asks for a name. The man replies that his name is Kane Welt. Soren Das searches the lists for that name and finds nothing. He searches the old lists and finds it. He reads it, and his expression changes. He says that Kane Welt was listed as missing 11 years ago in the chasm near Hallstow. He says that the entire party disappeared there and that they didn't even look for the porter. He says this quietly and almost apologetically. Kane replies that they really didn't look for him.
He doesn't say that he fell into a crevasse on the second hour of the first expedition of his life. He doesn't say that he fell for 4 days. No one here would ask about that, and no one would believe it. Soren Das hands him a card. He says that by law, a missing person is considered to have returned and that he's entitled to a bed at the shelter for 3 weeks. He says that after that, he'll have to fend for himself. Kane takes the card between 2 fingers. The card bends, and he immediately loosens his grip. On his way out, he brushes the door frame with his shoulder. A crack runs from floor to ceiling along the doorframe. Soren Das looks up at the sound of the crack. Kane is already in the hallway. Soren Das stands up, walks over to the doorframe, and runs a finger along the crack. He stands there for a long time. Then he tells his assistant that old buildings need to be repaired. He's saying this to himself, not to his assistant. The shelter stands on the outskirts, right up against the wall. Inside are 8 cots and the smell of cheap food. A guy of about 18 is sitting on the seventh cot, mending his shoulder strap. The guy's hands are calloused, and his jacket has 7 stripes. He looks up and says that the only one available is the one by the window, and that it's drafty there. He says his name is Jet Marlowe. Kane sits down on the bunk by the window. The bunk creaks as it folds beneath him. Jet looks at the debris. Jet says this is his 9th bunk in a month, and that the storekeeper is going to kill him. Then he laughs. He's the first person in 11 years to laugh next to Kane without any malice. Kane looks at him, and something inside him shifts a little. He doesn't know what to call it. There was nothing like this in the tier. Jet brings him a second mattress and lays it on the floor. He says the floor is more honest. At night, Kane lies on the floor and listens to the city. The city hums evenly and foolishly. He holds the leash with both hands. He counts his shares. Downstairs, he used to measure himself by the Lord's pressure. Here, there's nothing to measure by. He decides to measure by the concrete. 1 full-length step is a crack. So he can't take full-length steps. That means he has to place his foot as if on thin ice. He gets up and walks around the room until morning. Jet leads him down the stairs and says the meeting is at 6 at the east gate. Kane follows and counts the steps. He places his foot on each one as if on thin ice. Out of 20 steps, 2 crack. That's better than yesterday. Yesterday, they all cracked. It's damp outside. The city is heading to work. Kane looks at the people and sees that they aren't watching their step. He doesn't understand how anyone can live without watching where they're going. Down below, anyone who didn't watch their step lost a foot within the first hour. Jet says they have to go to the shop first. He says that without boots and a shoulder strap, they won't even let a porter into the funnel. The shop stands in a row of similar shops under a canopy. The shopkeeper is short and grumpy, and he immediately says he doesn't sell on credit. Jet says they'll pay in cash. Kane lays out half the money he was given at the shelter on the counter. The shopkeeper squints and takes a pair of boots off a hook. Kane takes the right boot. The upper bursts open along the seam in his fist. The shopkeeper stops squinting. He takes down another pair of boots. These are sturdier. Kane handles them differently this time. He doesn't squeeze them. He curls his fingers and holds them suspended, as if cupping water in his palms. The boots remain intact. The owner says the first pair was defective. He says this because he has no other explanation. Then Kane tries on the shoulder strap, and the clasp remains in his fingers. Then he picks up the flask, and 4 fingerprints appear on it. The shopkeeper stares at these dents for a very long time. He takes the flask and turns it toward the light. He says that such dents are left by a press. Kane replies that the flask was already like that. The shopkeeper is silent. Then he says he'll give the flask away for free if Kane also takes the gloves. The gloves are old, thick, and made of cowhide. The owner says they provide a softer grip. He says this while looking away. Kane realizes that this man has just helped him and hasn't admitted it to himself. He takes the gloves. What follows is what he will later recall as the hardest work in 1,100 years. First cut. He's standing in the shelter's courtyard, holding a raw egg that Jet bought for breakfast. He has to keep it intact for 100 breaths. He cracks the shell on the 9th breath. He takes the second one. He cracks it on the 20th. By the 6th egg, he's made it to 40 breaths. Jet sits on a step, counting aloud, and says this is the most expensive lesson of his life because the eggs cost money. Second cut. Night. Kane walks through the empty warehouse behind the orphanage and practices placing his foot. He discovers a rule. The force flows into the ground through the heel.
So he has to touch down with the ball of his foot first and gradually increase the pressure. He does this 300 times. He does this 1,000 times. By morning, he walks from one end of the warehouse to the other without kicking up any dust. Third cut. He's carrying a toolbox and learning not to yank on the handle. He holds the handle with 2 fingers instead of his whole hand. With 2 fingers, he feels the limit. With his whole hand, he doesn't feel it. He commits this to memory as rule number 2. Fourth scene. He climbs up the shelter's wall to the roof and back down. He does this to figure out how many bricks he'll crush. The first time, he pulls 8 bricks out of the wall. The last time, not a single one. Jet finds him on the roof at dawn and says the storekeeper has already asked 3 times who's breaking the wall. He says he told him it was rats. He says the storekeeper believed him. He says the storekeeper's a fool. Then he sits down next to him and stays silent. Then he says he saw Kane holding a box with 2 fingers. He says not even a 4th-level hunter could do that. He asks point blank who he is. Kane replies that he's a porter who went missing 11 years ago. It's true, and that's enough. Jet nods and asks no more questions. By 6 o'clock, they arrive at the eastern gate. 2 trucks and a dozen people are already there. The guild is called Stone Seam, and it's small and poor. You can tell by the trucks. The leader is waiting by the cab. She's a woman in her 30s with a short scar across her eyebrow. She has 3 stripes on her jacket. 3rd level. Jet whispers that this is Isla Ren and that she pulled 8 people out of the 2nd funnel when the vault collapsed. He says no one lies to her. Isla Ren walks down the line and looks each person in the face. She reaches Kane and stops. She looks at his ID card. She reads the stamp. No rank. She asks why an empty one would go into the 3rd funnel. Kane replies that he needs money. She says that everyone needs money and that the dead don't need it at all. She says she's taking him only because 2 porters didn't show up. She says he'll go last and mustn't fall behind. She says that if he falls behind, no one will come back for him. Kane replies that he understands. She looks at him for another second. There's something about his face she doesn't like, and she can't figure out what it is. Then she turns away and orders them to load up. It's cramped in the back of the truck. A burly guy with 2 stripes sits down next to Kane and immediately starts telling him how he carried a wounded man on his back during the last run. He speaks loudly. He looks at the blank space and at his ID card and says that a stretcher bearer is only half a man. He says a stretcher bearer is needed to haul other people's spoils and keep his mouth shut. Jet blushes. Kane doesn't reply. He stares through the gap between the planks and watches the road. He's thinking about something else. He's thinking that there are 16 people sitting in this truck bed, and that if he stumbles on a bump and braces his hand against the side will cave in, and 16 people will fly onto the road under the wheels. He rests his palms on his knees. He sits motionless for 2 hours. He holds the leash. The 3rd funnel stands in an old quarry. It looks like a hole in the air with jagged edges, and a chill emanates from it. Kane approaches and stops 10 paces away. He smells something. It's the smell of dry ash. He knows that smell. That's what it smells like on the 4th level after the furnaces have burned out. He stands and looks, and a chill runs down his spine, not from the funnel. Isla Ren gathers everyone and explains the rules. She says the funnel is a 3rd level one and that it contains 2 chambers and a corridor. She says the loot is in the 1st chamber and that no one is to enter the 2nd chamber. She says that over the past month, 3 porters went into the 2nd chamber and never returned. She says that if anyone goes in there for the reward, she'll personally leave them there. She says that something has changed in the lower chamber and that the guild has submitted a request to the oversight
and that the oversight will respond in 6 months. She says this calmly, and everyone understands that she's angry. Then she divides the group. Hunters go first, porters follow them. Kane is last. They enter. Inside, it's warm and dry, and the walls glow a dim white. Jet walks ahead of Kane and glances back at him every 20 steps. The first hall is wide. Creatures the size of dogs are crawling across the floor, and the hunters strike them quickly and efficiently. It's just a job, no fear. Kane watches this and realizes one thing that terrifies him more than anything he's seen in 1,000 years. He feels no danger. Not a bit. He stands in the middle of the hall where people are risking their lives, and his body is asleep. His body doesn't react. Silence lasts for 3 breaths. On the 4th, whatever was creaking emerges from the hallway. It stands 1.5 times as tall as a person and is made of foreign bones. The bones are foreign and mismatched, held together without tendons. Its head sits low between its shoulders. Instead of a face, it has a blank plate. Isla Ren says one word, and that word means retreat. The hunters retreat in formation, a tight, disciplined formation. Kane looks at the creature, and his mind grows very calm and very cold. He's seen this before. It's a gatherer. On the lower tiers, gatherers follow the army, gathering what's left after battle to build themselves up. A scavenger isn't a fighter. A scavenger is a sign that an army was somewhere nearby. He looks at the bones in the creature's body and counts. 3 porters. He sees a human skull in its shoulder, and a strap from a guild helmet is still attached to that skull. The scavenger takes a step forward. The floor cracks beneath him. A heavy-set guy with 2 stripes stands closest and strikes first. He strikes well. The blade pierces the creature's chest and gets lodged between its ribs. The creature lowers its arm, and the guy is flung against the wall, sliding down it. He doesn't get back up. Isla Ren drops everything and charges forward alone. She manages to strike 3 times. She parries the first arm, dives under the second, and slashes at the knee. The creature turns faster than it should. Isla Ren rolls out of the way and is grazed by the blow. She falls onto her side. Blood seeps from under her shoulder guard. Jet screams and runs toward her, which is the stupidest thing he could possibly do. Jet runs toward the 3rd-tier hunter who's been beaten to a pulp. Jet has 7 stripes. Jet is holding a short cleaver. Kane watches his back. And right then, something stirs within him. Something that hasn't stirred once in 11 years on that side. Not rage. He'd forgotten rage back in the 2nd century. A very simple thought rises within him. This kid had carried his 2nd mattress. Kane lets go of the leash. He lets go for 1,000th of a second. He'll think about this many times later, and each time he'll feel he'd let go for too long. He takes a step. There are 22 steps between him and the creature. He covers them in a single stride. The air behind him collapses with a pop, knocking the people against the wall off their feet. He finds himself in front of the creature and places his palm against its sternum. He doesn't strike, he simply places his palm there. That's how they stop falling rock down below. The creature's ribcage folds inward like wet paper. Bones turn to dust from his palm and spread throughout its entire body. The creature is still standing when its midsection is already gone. Then it crumbles onto the floor in 2 piles. Dust hangs in the air. No one in the hall is breathing. Kane looks at his palm. His palm is clean. He thinks about how he took just a fraction and how that was enough to reduce to dust what had killed 3 people. So the leash needs to be shortened even further. He lowers his hand and takes a step back so as not to stand over Isla Ren. And this is where he makes a mistake. He takes a step back without thinking. He plants his foot flat on the ground
just as he's done for 1,000 years on the stone that bears the weight of a mountain. The floor of the third funnel isn't Yara's stone. The floor gives way. It doesn't crack, it just gives way. A circle 20 paces in diameter collapses along with him to the floor below. The vault follows the circle. It collapses in a wave from the center toward the walls. The light goes out. The stone hums. Cain falls along with the slab and lands on his feet in the lower hall, while half of the upper hall collapses on top of him. He raises his arms and catches the slab as it comes down on his head. He holds it in his palms. The slab weighs as much as a house. It rests in his arms, and he feels it no more than he would feel a blanket. He turns his head and sees that 2 people have fallen into the hole next to him, Jet and Isla Ren. Jet managed to grab her by the belt, and they lie in the dust 3 steps away. A second wave is coming down from above. Cain flips the slab over his head, sets it at an angle on the floor, and holds the second one in place. He makes a roof out of the 2 slabs. There are 3 people under this roof. The collapse lasts 9 breaths. He counts them out of habit. On the 9th, it goes quiet. Dust. Darkness. Jet coughs and says he can't see a thing. Cain replies that everyone is alive. He says this calmly, and because of that calmness, Jet stops coughing. Isla Ren comes to her senses a minute later. She feels her side, hisses, and falls silent. Then she lifts her head and sees 2 slabs stacked at an angle above her. She sees that a man is holding the corner of these slabs in place. She looks at his hands, then at his face. She's a woman who's been going into craters for 12 years, and she can calculate quickly. She says that something like this wouldn't hold, not even the first step. Cain replies that the slabs fell into place just right. She remains silent. She doesn't believe a single word. But she realizes that if he lets go, the 3 of them will become the 4th, 5th, and 6th on the list of the missing. So she says something else. She says they need a way out. Cain replies that there is a way out and that he can hear it. He hears the air. He finds a crack behind him. He sets the slabs aside so slowly, as if they were made of glass, and yet the floor beneath them still cracks under their weight. They emerge into the lower chamber, and here Cain stops. The lower chamber isn't a chamber at all. It's a platform. In the center of the platform stands a circle of black stone, and symbols are laid out in a circle around it. The symbols are ancient. He reads them at once, and his mouth goes dry. He'd seen circles like this on the 7th level. The lords use such circles to mark the location of a passage, not a funnel, a passage. The difference is that a funnel opens from this side, while a passage opens from the other. He approaches the circle and touches the stone with his finger. The stone is warm. In the center of the circle lie 3 items: a porter's belt, a second belt, a third. Nothing else. Isla Ren looks at the belts, sits down on the floor, and covers her face with her hand. She says she's contacted the oversight 4 times. She says they told her that the 3rd funnel is stable. She says she'll proceed with the paperwork and that no one will listen to her because the stone seam has no money. Jet says that now she has proof. She replies that the proof is what's left of the vault. She says they'll now claim her party brought the vault crashing down and that the 3 porters died because of her. She says this calmly, and that very calmness terrifies Jet. Cain listens and realizes one simple thing. He took a step. That step caused the vault to collapse. Because of the collapsed vault, this woman will lose everything. He asks what will happen to the guild. She replies that the guild will be shut down for destroying the 3rd level shaft. She says the fine is so high that not even a major guild could pay it. She says she doesn't care because 14 people are alive. She says only 1 person is dead and that it's her own fault for not leading the people away a minute sooner. Cain looks at her, and for the first time in 1,000 years, feels something against which there was no protection down below. He feels guilt. He says it wasn't a cave-in that brought the vault crashing down. He doesn't get to finish his sentence. Light streams in from above. A ladder is lowered through the opening. The rescue team is already at work up there. They're being pulled up. On the surface, the quarry is packed with vehicles, blue flashing lights, people in gray with the oversight emblem. And among them stand strangers, black jackets with a gold circular emblem. Jet whispers that it's noon. He says it's the largest guild in the country and that they don't go down to the third level. He says they have no business being here. At the front of the group in black stands a tall man in his 30s with a composed face and a single stripe on his shoulder. They're held in the quarry until dark. The supervisor sets up a tent and questions everyone one by one. Kane is called up 16th. A woman in gray is sitting at the table, and she doesn't look up from her papers. She isn't wearing earrings, her hair is pulled back into a bun, and the name Verna Holt is written on her clipboard. She asks where he was at the time of the collapse. He replies that he was in the first chamber by the sacks. She asks what he saw. He replies that he saw the creature and that the hunters engaged it in battle. She asks how he ended up in the lower chamber. He replies that he fell through. She checks a box and says he's free to go. And just as he's reaching the exit, she asks one last question without looking up. She asks why there's no dust on his gloves. Kane stops. He looks at his gloves. Everyone who had climbed out of the collapse was covered in gray dust from head to toe. His gloves are clean because he held the slabs with his palms, and the dust burned off under the pressure. He replies that he wiped them down. Verna Holt looks up for the first time. She stares at him for exactly 4 seconds. Then she says he can go. She writes something on her tablet. She writes a single word and underlines it twice. They drive back in silence. The heavy guy with the 2 stripes is being transported in another car under a sheet. Jet sits next to Kane and stares at the floor. He says quietly that he saw the guy take 20 steps in a single stride. He says he won't tell anyone. He says it's not a promise, but a request. Kane replies that he knows. That night at the shelter, Jet can't sleep. He sits on his bunk and mends a shoulder strap that's no longer there. He does this to keep his hands busy. He says that the guy with the 2 stripes kept spewing filth all the way to the funnel, and that now he's ashamed he was glad when the guy finally shut up. Kane replies that shame is the right thing, and that shame must be carried, not thrown away. He says that down below, he saw those who had thrown away their shame in the 1st century, and that they ceased to be human before they stopped breathing. Jet lifts his head. He asks where down below is. Kane is silent for a long time. Then he says it's where the red sky appears once a year. He says nothing more, and Jet doesn't ask. Morning brings the first news. The same face appears on every screen in the city. Tobias Croy stands against the backdrop of a quarry and recounts how he tracked down a Type 2 creature, how he fought it alone, and how the cave-in was the price of victory. He says he mourns the fallen porter. He says Noon will cover the expenses of the Stone Seam Small Guild. Numbers scroll across the bottom of the screen. 40 million views overnight. Jet looks at the screen and says it's a lie from the first word to the last. Kane looks at the screen and is thinking about something else entirely. He's thinking that this man just publicly stated that there was a Type 2 creature on the 3rd funnel. That means the oversight is now obligated to seal off the square. That means no one will go to the black circle down there for half a year. That means whoever drew the circle has been granted 6 months of peace. He says this out loud. Jet doesn't understand. Kane repeats it more simply. He says that Croy lied not for glory, but to keep anyone from going down there. Or maybe he lied for glory and didn't realize what he'd done. He says he doesn't know which of the two options is worse. The second piece of news arrives around noon. Ailu Ren is summoned to the Oversight Committee. The Stone Seam Guild is suspended pending an investigation. Their accounts are frozen. 14 people are left without work in a single morning. Jet brings this news from the street, his hands trembling. He says that now no guild will take any of them because everyone knows they've lost the funnel. He says that a porter without a guild won't even be allowed into the first funnel. He says that in 3 weeks they'll be evicted from the shelter. Kane listens and does the math. He calculates just as he did downstairs when he was dividing up the water they'd found by the day. He says they need money today, not in a month. He asks where they can find work without a guild. Jet replies that there's only one place and that they don't go there. He's talking about the gray courtyards by the south wall. He says they hire people there for unlicensed runs into abandoned first-level craters. He says they pay cash that same evening and that 1 in 3 never comes back. Kane stands up and says they'll go tonight. Jet says he's not going. He says he's afraid. He says it straight out and doesn't look away. Kane looks at him and says that it's right to be afraid and that he'll go alone while Jet waits at the entrance and keeps the exit open. He gives the boy a job he can handle. Jet agrees. He doesn't realize that he's just been turned away. By evening, they're at the south wall. The courtyards are gray and low, and they smell of oil. The recruiter is sitting on a crate, looking through cards. He picks up Kane's card, sees the stamp without a step, and laughs. He says they don't even take empty ones here. He says an empty is a sack of meat that carries sacks of meat. He says this loudly enough for the 20 people around them to hear. This is the second skeptic in 3 days, and he's not like the first one. Soren Das simply didn't believe it. This one is enjoying himself. Kane looks at him impassively. Then he walks over to the metal support beam of the awning. He grasps it with 2 fingers through his oxhide glove. He pulls down and to the side. He does this a quarter of the way and very slowly. The channel beam bends into a figure 8. The awning doesn't fall. It just stops being straight. The yard falls silent. The foreman gets up from the crate. He looks at the channel beam, then at his hands, and then back at the channel beam. He takes a card, stamps it, and says hoarsely that he'll take him for 2 shifts. He doesn't laugh anymore and doesn't look up even once for the rest of the evening. What follows are 3 days that Kane will later remember as the most boring of his life. First job, an abandoned manhole under a bridge. 8 creatures the size of a cat. He crushes them with the sole of his shoe, being careful not to break through the floor. He gets 200. Second job, a flooded basement. He dives in and stays underwater for 40 minutes because he now has to breathe less often than he thought. Upstairs, they decide he's drowned. He emerges with 2 bags, and the employer pays him double without a word. Third job, a nighttime sweep in an empty warehouse. He snaps the leash once and leaves a shoulder imprint on a concrete column. He returns an hour later and covers the imprint with mortar. He does this himself and tells no one. He's learning not only to control his strength, he's learning to cover his tracks. By the 4th day, he has enough money to last a month, clothes that don't fall apart, and a rumor circulating through the gray courtyards. The rumor says a blank has appeared who bends iron. It's a silly rumor, and no one checks it out, but a rumor is a trail, and trails get found. On the 5th day, they're waiting for them at the shelter. 3 cars, black jackets with a gold circle. Tobias Croy's assistant steps out of the first car. He says that the Noon Guild is recruiting porters for the closed square, and that they're specifically taking those who were in the 3rd funnel. He says the pay is triple. He says that refusal will be recorded as a refusal to cooperate with the oversight. Jet turns pale. Kane asks why Noon needs porters from a closed guild. The assistant replies that it's none of his business to ask questions. Just then, Isla Ren steps out of the second car. She's in civilian clothes. She has no stripes on her shoulder. She looks away. She says flatly that she signed the transfer. She says she has 14 people to feed. She says that Noon bought out the Stone Seam's debts this morning. She says that she's now their forewoman and that she's taking her former crew with her. She says all this while looking past them. Jet asks what they'll be doing in the restricted zone. Isla Ren replies that Noon has been granted access to the lower chamber of the third shaft. Kane looks up. She says the clearance was signed last night. She says that Croy is personally heading down there. She says they're going there in 2 days and that the mission sounds like an artifact retrieval. She utters the word with disgust. There are 2 days left before the descent, and Kane spends them with Jet. He does this out of cold calculation and admits it to himself. The kid will go down with everyone else. That means the kid has to come back. That means he needs to be taught. They head to the vacant lot behind the warehouses. Kane positions him 5 steps away and states the first rule. He says that down there, it's not the strongest who survives, but the one who figures out sooner how it will all end. He says that eyes lie, but the ground doesn't. He makes Jet read the ground. He shows him how to tell the difference between the tracks left by a creature heading out to hunt and those left by a creature heading out to feed. He says that a hunter plants his front foot deeper. He says that a creature feeding plants its feet evenly. Jet gets it on the 3rd try. Kane's second rule is about sound. He says that before the master emerges from the darkness, there is silence, and that this silence is different from the usual kind. He says that in ordinary silence, you can hear water dripping. He says that in that silence, you can't hear anything, because all living things around it have already stopped breathing. He says that if Jet hears such silence, he has 9 breaths. Jet asks where exactly the number 9 comes from. Kane replies that he counted them. Jet asks how many times. Kane replies, enough. The 3rd rule is about the leash. He doesn't explain the ranks to the boy. He puts it more simply. He says that strength isn't what you can do, but what you can resist doing. He says that Jet will one day have stripes on his shoulder, and that on that day, he must remember this phrase. Jet laughs and says he's at the 7th level and won't go any higher. Kane replies that a level is just a number on a card, not a sentence. He says he's seen those who had everything break down and those who had nothing but stubbornness survive. He says stubbornness counts where nothing else does. Next comes a montage of 3 shots, and the first shot is of his legs. Kane makes Jet run across a vacant lot until dark and forces him to land on the balls of his feet. He says that's what everyone does who walks across a collapsed arch. Jet falls 11 times, and on the 12th try, he crosses the log without looking down. The second exercise is grip strength. Kane makes him carry a sandbag with one hand, using just 2 fingers. Jet holds it for 4 breaths and drops it. By evening, he can hold it for 20. Kane says that with 2 fingers, a person feels their limit, but with the whole hand, they don't. Jet remembers this as the strangest thing he's ever heard. The third exercise is darkness. Kane leads him into the warehouse basement, turns off the lights, and leaves. He leaves the boy alone for an hour. He does this cruelly and knows it's cruel. An hour later, he comes back down and finds Jet sitting with his back to the wall, a cleaver on his lap, and his eyes wide open. Jet says it was scary and that he didn't move because he didn't know what was around him. Kane says that's the right answer. He says that over the course of 1,000 years, he's seen those who started moving in the darkness perish.
Jet latches onto those words. He asks point blank if it was literally 1,000 years. Kane replies that it was. He says just that one sentence and doesn't return to the subject. He says that time passes differently there, that he kept track with notches, and that there were exactly 1,000 notches. Jet is silent for a very long time. Then he asks what it was like there. Kane replies that there wasn't a single person there who would have brought him a second mattress. The next day, they're summoned to line up at the gates of noon. The guild building is huge and white, and in the lobby stands a glass display case filled with trophies. The porters are led through the service entrance. They're dressed in black with a gold circle, and Jet touches the patch and says he never thought he'd wear one like that. Isla Ren approaches them by the trucks. She pulls Kane 2 steps aside and speaks quickly and quietly. She says she signed the transfer because otherwise 14 people would have ended up in the gray courtyards. She says she isn't asking for understanding. Then she gets to the point. She says she saw how the slabs were laid and that slabs don't settle like that. She says she's been going into the craters for 12 years and that she doesn't make mistakes about these things. She asks him directly who he is. Kane looks at her and makes up his mind in a split second. He replies that he was a porter for this country, that he fell into a fissure beneath Halstow, and that he returned a different man. He says he can't say any more and that he won't lie. Isla Ren nods. She says that's enough. Then she says that Croy is bringing a drilling rig and 8 hunters, all at least 3rd tier, down. She says she's been ordered to lead the porters to the circle and hold the perimeter. She says she asked Noon for a report on the missing people and was denied. She says that for the first time in 12 years, she's going down without knowing why. Kane replies that he does know why, and that makes it worse. The descent begins at 6 in the morning. The shaft has been cleared and scaffolding has been lowered into it. Searchlights are shining below. The lower chamber no longer resembles what Kane had seen before. Frames stand around a black circle. A drill rod hangs above the circle. 8 Noon hunters are spread out along the perimeter, working efficiently and silently. Tobias Croy stands at the very edge of the circle, studying the markings. He turns as the porters are brought in. He walks along the line and says that today is history, and that in a year's time, this date will be taught in schools. He says that a source lies beneath the circle and that Noon will be the first to reach it. He speaks eloquently, and half the people believe him. Kane looks at the markings on the stone and reads them a second time in the good light. And now he sees what he hadn't seen in the dark. The markings aren't just marking a spot. The markings are counting. It's a tally. The outer row is full. The middle row is full. The inner row is 2/3 full. He looks at the 3 bands still lying in the center, and everything becomes very simple and very bad. The circle isn't being filled with time. The circle is being filled with those who have entered it. 3 porters mean 3 marks. He lifts his head and counts the people in the hall. 26 people. He approaches Croy and speaks loudly so everyone can hear. He says they must not drill. He says the circle counts those who have entered and that the inner row is almost full. He says that if they break through the stone, the count will close early. The room falls silent. Croy turns slowly. He looks at the porter without a step, wearing a stranger's jacket. He asks where the empty one learned to read 7th grade signs. Kane replies that he's seen them before. Croy smiles and says he saw them in a cheap book. He says that for disrupting the work, the porter will be fined a year's wages. He tells security to take him upstairs. 2 men approach Kane. That's when Isla Ren intervenes. She steps forward and says that, as foreman, she demands that work be halted until an inspection is conducted. She says that 3 of her people went missing right here. Croy looks at her and says very calmly that her guild exists only as long as he wants it to.
He says that if she opens her mouth one more time, 14 people will find themselves on the street tomorrow. He says this quietly and only to her. She clenches her jaw and walks away. Croy gives the order. The drill goes down. The rod touches the black rock, and the sound it makes isn't what it should be coming from the rock. The sound is hollow. On the 9th breath, the silence ends. A column of ash shoots upward from the opening in the circle, piercing the vault and disappearing into the upper hall and beyond. Cain stands 2 steps from the edge, and nothing can move him. He's holding the leash. He's holding it the way one holds the rope from which a man hangs. The ash rains down. It is dark in the hall, and in this darkness, something tall stands by the opening. It did not come out. It is already there. Cain looks at it and realizes that the newcomer's body is made of a foreign stone, and that this stone is from the 17th tier. He recognizes the rock. He slept on such rock for 1,000 years. The newcomer turns his head. He speaks a second time, and the voice echoes inside Cain's head again. He utters that name. Cain does not answer. He takes a step to the side and stands between the opening and the staircase. Behind him are 26 people, almost all of them on the floor. Croy gets down on one knee and turns on his helmet lamp. The beam finds the figure by the circle. Croy sees her, and something in his face breaks. He shouts a command, and 8 midday hunters open fire, hitting their targets with precision. Light. A roar. 3 shots from the 3rd tier, 2 from the 2nd, and 1 from Croy himself. Cain watches this volley with cold attention and assesses it as he would assess falling sand. The volley reaches the newcomer and fizzles out against him. It doesn't ricochet. It fizzles out. The newcomer lowers his hand, and the nearest hunter folds in half, is thrown against the wall, and doesn't get back up. Croy shouts, "Retreat!" The retreat fails. The arriver takes a step, and from that single step, the drilling rig's frame tips sideways, the floor ripples like a wave, and people are knocked down. And then Cain makes his decision. He calculates quickly. He gives himself 2 beats, no more. He knows that 2 counts will leave a hole here. He takes 2 counts and steps forward, putting not his weight, but his direction into that step. He covers 10 steps in 1/100th of a breath and strikes upward from below with an open palm against the newcomer's chin. The blow connects. The intruder is torn from the floor, shoots up into the vault, breaks through it, rises higher, breaks through the upper vault, and vanishes into the field above the quarry, where he falls 300 paces from the breach. The shockwave pins Cain to the floor up to his ankles. He pulls his legs free and looks up at the 2 holes he's made in the 2 ceilings. He thinks very briefly and very angrily. He thinks he's taken on too much. Again. He turns around. No one in the hall saw the blow. Everyone saw the flash and the hole in the ceiling. He tells Isla Ren to get the people out, and he says it in a voice she doesn't dare argue with. She gathers her people. The porters head up the stairs. Cain goes last and, as he walks, slips his shoulder under a sagging beam and holds it in place until everyone has passed. Upstairs, the quarry looks like a war zone. One of the holes opened up right beneath the surveillance vehicles, and 2 of them are lying on their sides. 300 paces away in the field stands a crater. A figure slowly rises from the crater. It rises calmly. Half of its hull is broken, and it's piecing that half back together from the dirt and rubble as it moves. Croy climbs to the surface and sees this, and he sees something else as well. He sees that his blow didn't leave a single scratch on this creature, but that something else sent it through 2 floors. He turns toward the breach, and a very simple calculation begins to form in his mind. Cain approaches him and says they need to get the people behind the ridge.
Croy looks at him. He says the stretcher bearer is taking a lot of liberties. Kane replies that in a minute, there won't be any stretcher bearers or hunters here, only meat, and that there'll be less meat beyond the ridge. He says this matter-of-factly. Croy opens his mouth and closes it. He gives the order to retreat behind the ridge. He does this because he realizes the man is right and will remember for the rest of his life that he obeyed a nobody. The people leave. Kane remains in the field, and Verna Holt remains as well. She stands by the overturned car with a device in her hand and doesn't leave. She isn't looking at the creature. She's looking at the man in the porter's jacket who stands alone in the open field, facing what the First Order Guild is fleeing from. The newcomer walks toward him across the field. He takes his time. He speaks for the third time. He says he was sent to find the one who closed the gates on the 17th tier. He says they're still tallying the losses there. Kane listens and doesn't answer, and in his mind, something unfolds that he hadn't allowed himself to unpack for 11 years. He isn't recalling his life story. He's recalling movement. He's recalling how to position his palm to absorb the Lord's pressure. Fingers spread apart, elbow relaxed, weight on the back leg. He positions his palm exactly like that, and the visitor strikes, the blow landing squarely in that palm. Kane is knocked back 9 paces and plows a furrow in the ground. He holds his ground. He holds his ground and realizes something that makes something inside him quietly fall into place. This is first-rank pressure. A servant, not a lord, not even a centurion. The one who came for him is a messenger. Kane straightens up and shakes the dirt off his shoulder. He takes 3 steps. He does this deliberately, and for the first time since his return, he isn't afraid. He walks forward at a normal pace, and with every step he takes, a pit remains in the field and cracks spread across it. He closes in. The visitor strikes a second time. Kane deflects the blow with his forearm, sending it into the ground, where a fissure 40 paces wide opens up. What follows is something no one will ever be able to describe coherently. Kane fights at close range, with short, unheralded strikes. He strikes at the joints. He spent 1,000 years learning to strike at the joints because the creature living below has no heart and no throat, only joints. 6 strikes. On the 3rd, the intruder's shoulder collapses. On the 5th, he stops trying to recover. On the 6th, Kane places his palm in the center of the man's torso with the same motion used to stop falling rock, and the torso crumbles to dust. The dust settles. A crater remains in the field, and standing in the crater is a man in a torn black jacket with a gold circle on his shoulder. He stands holding a leash, and he's shaking, not from the battle. He's shaking because he took 3 shares, and it wasn't enough for him. He looks at his hands and says one word aloud. He says, "Enough." Then he walks back toward the ridge. Behind the ridge, 100 men lie behind rocks, watching the field. They saw the flashes and heard the roar. They saw the creature rise after the First Order Guild's volley. And they see a porter walking alone across the field. Croy is the first to stand up. He looks at Kane and says he owes them an explanation. Kane replies that the creature went into the fissure. He says he saw it fall through. He lies calmly and to their faces. He lies because he realizes that the truth will kill these people faster than any creature. Croy doesn't believe him for a second. He says there's a crater in the field as deep as a house. Kane replies that the creature made the crater. Croy stares at him for a long time. Then he tells his assistant that the report will read as follows. A 3rd-type creature rose from the lower hall and disappeared into the fissure. 6 casualties. He says there won't be a single word about the porters in the report. He says this while looking Kane straight in the eye. This isn't a deal. It's a warning. He shows that he knows how to cross people off the list.
Isla Ren approaches as everyone disperses. She sits down on a rock nearby and remains silent for a minute. Then she says she saw him brace his shoulder against the beam. She says the beam weighs 9 metric tons. She doesn't ask anything. She only says that her people are alive and that she'll remember this. Jet finds them half an hour later. He'd been guarding the exit as ordered, and he'd hauled 2 wounded men to the surface. His face is battered. He runs up and says he saw someone walking across the field from the collapse site. He says he couldn't make out who it was. He says this loudly so everyone nearby can hear. He's lying for the first time in his life, and he's lying well. Kane looks at him and realizes that the boy has grown up in a single morning. By evening, the quarry is cordoned off with a second perimeter. The army arrives. They set up watchtowers. The area is sealed off for a year. And that very evening, in the Oversight's service van, Vern Holt sits down at a table and lays out 3 items: a photograph of the crater, a reading from her device, which again showed 0, and a sheet from the archives. The sheet lists a group that went missing near Hallstow 11 years ago. 8 names. 7 are marked as deceased. The 8th is marked as missing. A porter, Kane Welt. Age at the time of disappearance, 22. She takes a recent photo from the monitoring station. In the photo is a man in his 30s with a strand of gray hair and a scar across his neck. She places the 2 sheets side by side. An 11-year difference. The face looks much older than just 11 years. The face looks so much older that she doesn't even bother to count. She stares at it for a very long time. Then she submits a request for full access to the Hallstow case file. The request is sent to headquarters, and 40 minutes later, she receives a denial. The denial isn't signed by the overseer. It's signed by an agency she's never heard of. The rejection arrives at 11:40 p.m., and at midnight, 2 men in plain clothes are standing by Verna Holt's pan. They don't show their credentials. They say that the Hallstow case is closed and that a 3rd-level analyst isn't supposed to ask questions above her level. They speak politely. One of them takes her tablet from the table and deletes the file right in front of her. She watches as the line disappears and doesn't say a word. When they leave, she pulls a paper copy out of her jacket pocket, one she'd made an hour ago out of old habit. She looks at it and realizes she's just crossed the line. She tucks the paper into the lining. In the morning, the square is handed over to the army. The porters are dismissed. They're driven back to the city in the same trucks, and no one in the back says a word. Jet is sleeping on Kane's shoulder and twitching in his sleep. Kane sits upright, his palms resting on his knees, staring at the gap between the planks. He thinks about what the messenger said regarding losses. Losses are tallied when they're about to collect. He thinks about how the one who does the tallying will come after the messenger. He doesn't know when. He only knows that down there, in 1,000 years, he's never once seen them send just one person and stop there. In the city, they're dropped off at the southern wall. Polden pays the settlement in cash and demands a non-disclosure signature. Croy's assistant hands out envelopes. He reaches Kane, holds out an envelope, and says that the guild thanks him for his work and no longer needs Velt's services as a porter. He says the card will be marked. Jet asks what marked means. The assistant replies that it means no guild in the country will hire him again. He says this flatly and with a hint of satisfaction. He's the 3rd skeptic this week, and he's the smallest of them all. Kane takes the envelope between 2 fingers and says he understands. He doesn't bend iron. He doesn't break anything. He simply turns around and walks away, and for some reason, the assistant remains standing there, feeling as though he's been overlooked. Isla Ren catches up with them a block away. She's not in uniform. She says she submitted a request to leave the South and that it was denied because her debts were bought along with her. She says she's now property, and that's what's called a contract. She says 14 people are in the same situation. She asks Kane what he plans to do. He replies that he's going to go down to Hallstau. She's silent, then says that Hallstau has been closed for 12 years and that it's solid concrete all the way through. He says concrete isn't a problem. She looks at him and realizes that for him, it really isn't a problem. The next 3 weeks are spent on the set, and there are 4 takes in this scene. First take. He runs out of money on the 9th day. The mark on his card works better than he thought. No one will hire him at any of the yards. The foreman by the south wall looks away and says he got a call. Kane finds work where they don't ask for ID cards. He works as a loader at the night port. He hauls containers one by one while the crane sits idle. The foreman yells at first, then falls silent, and then starts putting him on the hardest shift and paying him triple. No one asks where he's from. At the port, they don't ask. Second cut. He learns to keep a grip on people. This turns out to be harder than on rock. People are fragile. He grabs a falling worker by the shoulder, and the man ends up with a bruise shaped like a palm for 3 days. He learns to grab their clothes, not their bodies. He learns to use his forearm, not his wrist. He commits this to memory as rule number 9. Third scene. Jet. The boy gets a job at a small work crew on the first tunnels and comes back with bruises and stories. He tells how he read the terrain and how he realized from the tracks that the creature was going hunting and how he led the group around it. He says the crew foreman asked how he knew that. He says he replied that he'd been taught. In the 3rd week, Jet comes in with a new card. He's at the 6th level. He holds the card with both hands, unable to believe it. He says that in 4 years he hadn't moved up even half a level, but here he is, up a level in just a month. Kane looks at him and says that a level is just a number. Jet replies that the number is different now. He laughs, and it's a good laugh. Fourth scene. Hallstau. Kane goes there 3 times. The first time, he just looks around. The village is abandoned and fenced off, and where the old crater used to be, there's a concrete paved area 100 paces across. The second time, he comes at night, walks around the perimeter, and counts the cameras. There are 41 cameras, which is too many for an abandoned settlement. The third time, he notices a fresh seam in the concrete on the pad. Someone had cut open the slab this year and poured concrete back in. He stands over that seam for half an hour. He thinks about how 11 years ago, his group entered an ordinary first-stage pit, and how 2 hours later, the floor gave way beneath them. He doesn't remember the screams. He only remembers that he fell for a long time, and that he had time to think about his mother, whom he would never see again. He doesn't allow himself to think about it for more than 3 breaths. He leaves. At the end of the 3rd week, everything falls apart in a single evening. Kane returns from the port at 6 in the morning, and there are cars parked at the shelter. Not black ones, gray ones with the surveillance emblem. A search is already underway inside. The storekeeper stands in the hallway, spreading his arms in a gesture of helplessness. 2 men are holding Jetta up against the wall. Kane walks in, and 4 of them immediately have him in their sights. Verna Holt comes out of the room. She looks at him and says this isn't an arrest. She says it's a temporary detention for identity verification. She says this loudly for her people to hear. Then she steps close to him and says very quietly that she has 20 minutes before the others arrive. She says that after his career, he's been with 3 agencies and that one of them isn't under the oversight's jurisdiction. She says she has one question and that his answer will determine whether he goes into the van or not. She asks how old he is. Kane looks at her. He sees before him a person who, for 3 weeks, has been digging where he was forbidden to dig. He answers truthfully. He says that on paper he's 33. He says that in his head he's 1033. Verna Holt doesn't blink. She pulls a folded sheet of paper from her lining, unfolds it, and holds it in front of him. It's an archive page on Halstow. She says the case involves 8 people, 7 dead and 1 missing. She says the case was closed by an agency that isn't listed in the registry. She says it wasn't closed 11 years ago, but a year and a half ago. She asks what happened at Halstow. Kane replies that there's no crater at Halstow. He says there's a passage there. He says he fell into it and emerged on the 17th level. He says he sealed it shut from the inside so that whatever was coming after him wouldn't rise to the surface. He says that after that, there was no way back for 1,000 years. Virna Holt folds the sheet. Her fingers are trembling, and she hides it. She says she believes him. She says she believes him because 3 weeks ago she saw a 0 on the instrument that isn't supposed to be a 0. Then she says the most important thing. She says that a year and a half ago, they cut open a slab beneath Halstow. She says they cut it open at the request of a private guild. She says the request was signed by Tobias Croy. And at that moment, an alarm sometimes in the courtyard, and others enter the shelter. There are 6 of them, and they aren't wearing gray. They're in dark blue with no insignia. The senior officer shows Virna Holt a document and says the detainee is being handed over to them. He says that analyst Holt is removed from the case effective immediately. He says she will be charged with breach of confidentiality. 2 of them take Kane by the arms. He walks calmly. He walks because Jet is standing behind him against the wall, because there are 8 shelter staff in the hallway, and because any sudden move here would leave only the foundation of this house standing. They lead him out into the courtyard. They put him in an armored van and lock the door with 3 bolts. The van pulls away. It's dark inside, and sitting across from him are 2 men with stun guns, both tense to the limit. Kane looks at them and realizes that these men are afraid of him personally, not just following orders. So they've been told. So someone higher up has already put all the pieces together. The van drives for 40 minutes and heads out of town. Kane keeps track of the turns and counts the time. At the 38th minute, he realizes they're not taking him to the city or to the base. They're heading north. There's only one place north of the city, Halstow. The van comes to a stop. The doors open. He gets out and sees that very concrete pad 100 paces away, with watchtowers along the perimeter, 4 covered trucks, and people in dark blue. And he sees that the fresh seam in the concrete has been torn open, revealing an open shaft leading down into the ground. Ash is billowing from the shaft. At the edge of the shaft stands a man in a suit without any insignia, and next to him stands Tobias Croy. The man in the suit approaches first and says he's glad to finally meet him. He says his last name is Dalen and that he doesn't hold any official position. He says he represents a committee that doesn't exist on paper. He says all this calmly and respectfully, and this very calmness stirs up an old sense of wariness in Kane. Down there, only those who had already made up their minds spoke that way. Dalen says the committee has known about him ever since the measuring column read 0. He says the column was inspected and found to be in working order and that it honestly indicated the scale had run out. He says enough has been collected over the past 3 weeks. A crater in the field, 2 collapsed floors, a channel bar in the courtyard by the south wall, containers at the port. He says the committee has no intention of detaining him. He says the committee wants to negotiate. Kane asks, what about? Dalen replies, about Halstow. He leads him to the edge of the mine shaft. A light is on down below. A staircase leads down, and scaffolding is visible in the depths. Dalen says that a year and a half ago, they detected activity beneath the slab. He says the committee opened up the mine and lowered instruments down. He says the instruments showed the same thing as the survey column, 0 on all scales. He says that over the past year and a half, 4 teams have gone down there. He says that only one returned, and not all of them. Kane looks down and remains silent. Dalen continues. He says that 3 weeks ago, in the third crater, what the committee had been waiting for a year and a half finally happened. He says that the circle beneath the third crater and the passage beneath Halstow are one and the same. He says that construction is underway down there. Not a passageway, a gate. Kane turns his head. Dalen says that over the past year and a half, 9 such circles have been recorded across the country. He says that all 9 are within a radius of 200 kilometers. He says that all 9 are tied to a single point and that this point is beneath Halstow. He says the committee doesn't know how to stop this and that the committee doesn't have anyone who can last more than 4 minutes in there. He says they do now. Kane asks why Croy is standing next to him. Dalen replies that Polden signed the request to open the slab at the committee's request and that a civilian was needed. He says that Croy was a tool and that the tool has served its purpose. Croy doesn't move at these words, only his jaw muscles twitch. Kane looks at him and realizes something he hadn't understood for 3 weeks. This man isn't the boss. This man is also someone's lackey. He looks at the golden circle on his shoulder and sees it for the first time as it truly is. A symbol. Nothing beneath it. Kane says he'll go down. Dalen nods as if it couldn't be any other way. He says a team will go down. He says Croy will lead the team because they need someone with a license. He says a dozen committee hunters and a squad of porters will be assigned to them. Kane says he's taking 2. He names Jet Marlowe and Isla Wren. Dalen says the 6th level kid will be a liability. Kane replies that the kid reads the terrain better than half the 3rd levels and that he won't argue any further. Dalen makes a note. The descent is scheduled for 2 days from now. These 2 days are shown in a montage of 3 scenes. First scene. Kane walks along the fence and tests his own limits. He finds a stretch of old highway outside the village and works there at night. He sets the boundary. 1/10 of a share is a crack in the asphalt. 1/4 is a pothole. Half is a 1-meter sinkhole. He trains himself to the point where he can walk 100 steps across gravel without dislodging a single stone, and then instantly take 1/4 of a share and return in a single breath. He calls this switching to himself. He spends 16 hours straight on this, and by the end, his hands are trembling, not from fatigue, but because, for the first time in 11 years, he feels his body as a tool rather than a threat. Second cut. Jet. The boy is brought in on the 2nd day, and he walks around the set with his mouth agape. Kane positions him in front of him and says they're going down not for victory, but for a return. He gives him the 4th rule. He says that down there, everything will call him by name, and that he must not answer. He says that whatever calls you by name already knows where you stand. Jet asks how Kane knows this. Kane replies that on the 17th level, he lost the few people he was with that way. He says this out loud for the first time and remains silent for 2 hours afterward. Third cut. Isla Wren. She's brought in that same day and immediately demands the group roster, a descent map, and a schedule. The committee refuses to provide either. She goes to Dalen and says she won't lead people blindly. Dalen replies that she won't be leading anyone at all and that she's going as a rank-and-file member. She returns, sits down on a crate next to Kane, and says she spent 12 years pulling people out of holes and that this is the first time she's being led into a hole as cargo. She says she signed a contract with Noon and that now they've explained to her that her signature is a collar. Kane replies that the collar is removed along with the hand of the person holding it. She looks at him from the side. She says that if he does that, he'll become the one the whole country will be hunting. He replies that they're already hunting him. That night, before the descent, Verna Holt comes to see him. She's allowed onto the platform under an old security clearance that hasn't been revoked yet. She says she has 8 minutes. She says that the Dalen Committee has existed for 19 years and that it was created after the first wave of sinkholes. She says that over the course of 19 years, the committee has closed 41 cases involving missing persons, and that all 41 are connected to the passages. She says the committee doesn't save people. The committee analyzes. It collects data and waits for the picture to come together. She says that Dalen hasn't lied about a single thing, and that's exactly why he can't be trusted. She says that a person who doesn't lie but simply leaves things unsaid is more dangerous than any liar. Then she says one last thing. She says she found a single line in the old Halstow case file that hadn't been crossed out. She says that the party's equipment inventory lists 8 sets, but 9 were issued. She says the 9th set was issued to a person who isn't on the list. She says the name in that column has been blacked out. She says it was blacked out by hand, and recently. Kane looks at her. He says there was a 9th person traveling with them. He says he doesn't remember his face. He says that over the course of 1,000 years, he's forgotten the faces of all 8 except one. Verna Holt says she's taking a leave of absence on her own initiative and that she'll keep digging. She says that if he comes back, he should find her. She says this very matter-of-factly and leaves. In the morning, the group descends. 22 people. Croy leads the way. Behind him are a dozen committee members. Then come Kane Jett and Isla Wren. The descent takes an hour and a half. The staircase descends 300 meters and opens into a natural shaft. The walls grow warm. At 200 meters, the signal cuts out. At 250 meters, the echo disappears. Jett turns around and whispers that he can't hear his own footsteps. Kane replies that this is normal and that it will get worse from here on out. At the bottom, they emerge into a hall 40 times larger than the 3rd crater. The vaulted ceiling is lost in the darkness, and circles are laid out across the entire floor of the hall. Kane stops and counts. 26 circles. Not 9, 26. They're all connected by lines, and all the lines converge at the center of the hall. In the center stands a structure as tall as a 7-story building built of black stone. It is unfinished. The top tier is missing. Croy raises his hand and the group stops. He speaks into the microphone to report to the top, but nothing comes through. He repeats himself. Silence. And then a sound comes from the direction of the structure. Not a creak, not a voice. It's the sound of work. Down there, someone is building something, and they're doing it right now. Kane looks at the unfinished top and at the 26 circles and figures it all out in 3 breaths. The circles aren't doors. The circles are supports. Each circle gathers a count and sends it to the center. 26 supports and 1 structure. He says aloud that this isn't a gate. Croy asks what it is then. Kane replies that it's a bridge. He says they're building the bridge from that side and erecting the supports on this one. He says that once the upper tier is in place, it won't be a messenger coming this way. An army will come. He turns to Croy and says they need to go upstairs and blow up the mine. And at that moment, a figure rises from the darkness at the base of the structure. It's twice as tall as the messenger, and a second one rises after it, and a third. Kane counts and stops counting at 14. Croy gives the order to form up. It's the right order, and it won't save anyone. The 10 members of the committee line up in a semicircle. Isla Wren shoves Jett behind her. Shane looks at the 14 figures, but he's not counting them. He's counting the distance to the stairs. 400 steps. He says one word to Isla Wren, and that word is up. She replies that she won't abandon the group. He says the group is dead and that only those who reach the stairs will survive. He says this clearly and loudly, and everyone hears him. Croy turns around and shouts that the stretcher bearer is causing panic. And then the first figure takes a step. Her step sends a shockwave through the floor, knocking down 5 of the 10 committee members. She covers 300 paces in 4 seconds. Kane steps out to meet her and takes 4 blows. He does it in one go, without hesitation. He meets her halfway, and as they clash, a shockwave ripples through the entire hall, causing a shower of stones to rain down from the ceiling. The figure folds in half, recoils, and crashes into the structure, chipping off a piece of it. Kane stands alone in the center of the hall, facing 13 opponents, and calls over his shoulder for them to get the people out. Isla Ren is the first to understand. She grabs Jet, pushes him toward the stairs, and begins rounding up the rest. Croy stands his ground. He looks toward the center of the hall, where a porter, without a step, has just flung aside a creature as heavy as a house. He sees it with his own eyes, yet his expression doesn't change. He tells his assistant to relay upstairs that the team has made contact. He says they need data. He doesn't stay out of bravery. He stays because he realizes that after this haul, he needs the record. What follows is a fight that Kane will later recall as the first normal day in 11 years, 13 against 1. He lands 5 blows, and the silence in the hall vanishes. He doesn't strike the bodies, he strikes the joints. He breaks the first one's knee and finishes her off with a palm strike to the base of the skull. He lets the second one pass by and strikes her in the back of the head as she runs past, sending her flying into the wall 100 paces away. The third and fourth grab him in a pincer grip, and he lets them close in, then drops down, and as they strike each other, he breaks both their hips with a single movement. He works quickly and efficiently, with that melancholy ease with which a person does what he has been doing every day for 1,000 years. And somewhere around the 7th one, he realizes he's smiling. He notices it, and a chill runs through him, stronger than anything happening around him. He thinks very clearly. I've returned home, not to Earth. I've returned home, here. He loses half a second to this thought, and the 8th one hits him in the shoulder, slamming him chest first into the floor. He breaks free from the floor and finishes off the 8th one, and after that, he doesn't smile anymore. By the time the 9th one arrives, he realizes a second thing. They aren't trying to kill him. They're trying to detain him. He looks past them at the structure and sees that work is continuing at the base and that the upper tier is being assembled right now, faster than before. He abandons the fight and heads toward the structure. 3 figures are clinging to him, and he drags them along with him as he walks, the floor collapsing with every step. He reaches the base and sees the one who is building it. It's not a creature. It's a human. He stands with his back to a black stone, working with his hands, and around him the stone molds obediently like dough. On him are the remnants of guild gear, an old model from 11 years ago. Kane says one word. He names the kit's number, 9. The man turns around. His face is human and completely calm, and his eyes have no whites. He says he's been waiting a long time. He speaks the language of the 17th tier, and he speaks it fluently. He says he was in the same group and that he fell through with everyone else, and that he was offered a choice, whereas Kane was not. He says he chose to serve. He says that in 11 years up there, he's erected 26 pylons and that there's just one left to erect. He says Kane is 4 days late. Kane shakes off the 3 men hanging on him and takes a step forward. And at that moment, the builder raises his palm, and everything in the hall comes to a halt. Not a sound. not a movement. Cain feels the pressure bearing down on him, and this pressure is no ordinary kind. It's the pressure of a centurion. He holds him up with 3 fingers in a familiar motion, and as he holds him, he realizes he can hold him but cannot move forward beneath him. The builder says he has no intention of fighting. He says the bridge will be completed in 4 days, and that after that, everyone will be offered a choice. He says Cain will be offered it first. He says they remember him down there, and that the gates he closed on the 17th tier cost such heavy losses that they're now offering him an entire tier in exchange. Cain replies that he already refused 1,000 years ago. The builder says that back then he was alone. He says that now he has a young boy up there who carries his second mattress. He says this without a hint of a threat. He speaks like a man reporting the weather. And Cain realizes that for 11 years, this man has been walking among the people up there, observing and remembering. He takes 6 shares. He didn't want to take 6. The centurion's grip breaks, and the builder takes a step back for the first time, a look of interest appearing on his face. Cain takes those 6 steps and strikes, and the builder takes the blow on his forearm, and the forearm holds. They close in on each other.
11 blows in 3 seconds. Cain breaks his collarbone, his ribs, and something in his back. The builder makes no attempt to fight back. He just holds on. He holds on for exactly as long as necessary. And when Cain swings his arm for the 12th time, the builder says the top tier is up. Behind him, the structure closes. Not completely, 3/4 of the way. And the entire hall fills with a low hum, and all 26 circles on the floor flare up at once. Cain lets go of the builder, turns around, and sees that pillars have shot up from the circles. 26 pillars rise into the vault and beyond. And he realizes this isn't a flare-up, it's a connection. 26 points across the country have just connected with this hall. He drops everything and runs toward the stairs. He takes 8 shares, the first time in 11 years he's taken 8. He takes 400 steps, and as he passes, the hall folds away behind him. He finds the group 100 meters into the ascent. 11 of the 22 are there. Jet is alive. Isla Ren is alive and dragging the wounded man. Croy is alive, holding a camera, and he's filming everything. Cain tells them to keep climbing and not to look back. The mine is cracking. He walks last and, in 2 sections, braces the ceiling with his shoulders while the others pass through. In the final 30 meters, the ceiling gives way, and he puts his back against a slab and stands there for 120 breaths while the 11 people are pulled out one by one from above. He emerges last, carrying the slab on his back, and places it on the concrete platform, causing the platform to sink. It's daytime above ground. The sun is shining. And it's not just committee members standing on the platform. The army is standing there. And no one is looking at the mine. Everyone is looking up at the sky, to the north, east, and south, because 26 pillars of light stand above the horizon. They're visible from 200 kilometers away, and the whole country can see them. Dalen approaches Cain. He's calm and pale. He asks what's down there. Cain replies that the bridge is 3/4 complete and that there are 4 days left. Dalen asks where that figure came from. Cain says the builder gave him the figure. Croy turns and says there was no builder. He says there were only creatures down there. He says this loudly, staring at the recorder in his hand. And Cain realizes that this man has already decided which version he's going to sell. By evening, the country is wide awake. The pillars have been standing for 26 hours, and they're being filmed from every angle. There are 40 million videos online. The government declares a state of emergency. The guilds are rallying people to the nearest gathering points. And at 2100, Tobias Croy goes on the air. He stands against the backdrop of a quarry in a clean uniform and says he was down there.
He says he saw the core. He says it's a cluster of fourth-kind creatures and that they're controlled by a collective mind. He says that Noon is already developing a mop-up plan and that the country needs a unified command. He doesn't name a single person among those who went down. He shows footage from the dashcam, which captures the darkness, a flash, and a falling rock. The builder isn't in the footage. Kane watches this broadcast from the window of a barracks at the Hallstow site. Isla Wren is standing nearby. She says he cut out 12 seconds. She says she saw him pause the recording when Kane went to the base. Kane replies that it doesn't matter anymore. He says that only the number 4 matters and that 1 day has passed out of 4. The next 24 hours are shown in a montage, and there are 4 cuts in this montage. First cut. The committee sets up its headquarters. Dalen gathers everyone who went out and demands statements. 11 people tell 11 different stories. No one except Kane saw the builder up close. 2 saw a figure by the rock, and both say it was a creature. Croy submits a written statement in which the builder is not mentioned. Dalen listens to everyone and, at the end, approaches Kane and says he believes him. He says he believes him because the committee has the instrument readings and that 1 second before the circles flashed, the instruments detected a human pulse in the center of the hall. He says this reading is going into the archives and that the archives are sealed. He says the builder will not be revealed publicly. Kane asks why. Dalen replies that a person who has gone over to the other side is not a monster but a traitor, and that the country cannot withstand a second word. He says that panic will kill more people than the bridge. He says this calmly and honestly, and from this honesty, Kane realizes what Verna Holt said 3 weeks ago. This man isn't lying. He's just making decisions for everyone. Second cut. Jet. The boy has been shaking for 2 days straight. He hasn't slept since dawn. He's sitting on a crate, holding his 6th level card, and says that 22 went down, but only 11 came out, and that he didn't do anything. Kane sits down next to him and says he led 4 of them out in the first 100 meters, and that without him, they would have gone the wrong way in the dark. Jet says that's not it. Kane replies that's exactly it. He says that over 1,000 years, he's seen one simple thing. He says the great ones didn't survive out there. Those who survived were the ones who did the little things at the right time. He says the kid did the little things at the right time, and that 4 people are still breathing. Jet is silent for a long time, then asks if he'll go back down again. Kane replies that he will. Jet says that in that case, he will too. Kane says no, and he says it harshly. Jet stands up and says he didn't ask for permission. He says that 3 weeks ago, Kane told him that a step is a number, not a sentence. He says that if that was true, then his 6 isn't a sentence either. He walks away, and Kane remains seated, realizing that the kid has just used his own rule against him and that he has no rebuttal. Third cut. Isla Wren. She gathers her 14 people and announces that she is unilaterally terminating the contract with Noon. They tell her that's impossible. She drives into town to file the paperwork, but is turned away at the entrance. She returns and tells Kane that the collar cannot be removed. He asks who's holding the leash. She replies that Stone Seam's debts were bought out not by Noon, but by the fund behind Noon, and that the fund is registered in 3 jurisdictions. She says there's no hand to grab. Kane listens and remains silent. He thinks about how everything was simpler down below. Down there, every power had a body. Fourth cut. Verna Holt. She arrives at the site at night in a private car without a pass, and she's let through because there's a man at the gate who was in the same political party as her 12 years ago. She finds Kane and lays out papers on the hood of his car. She says she's been investigating the committee for 19 years.
She says she discovered that the committee was formed after the first wave of sinkholes and that the committee's first case involved 9 people who went missing near another town. She says the pattern is the same. The group heads down. One of them returns. A few years later, crop circles begin to appear in this area.
She says there have been 41 such cases over the past 19 years. She says the committee knew about the mechanism from the very beginning. She says the committee never once tried to rescue those who fell through. The committee was waiting. Kane asks for what? She replies, for data. She says there's a 4-line memo in the archives. She says the memo states that an attempt to evacuate those who had fallen through was deemed impractical and that priority was given to monitoring the development of contact. She says the memo was signed 19 years ago and that the signature is legible. She turns the sheet over. Kane looks at the signature. Dallin. He stands there, holding the paper between 2 fingers and very carefully places it back on the hood. He says that if someone had gone down there 19 years ago, they would have emerged on the 17th level after 11 years, not 1,000. He says this very calmly. Verna Holt replies that if someone had gone down 11 years ago, they would have come out in a month. Kane stares into the darkness and says nothing. Then he says that doesn't change the number 4. He says they'll do the calculations later. On the morning of the second day, the committee announces the operation. The plan is simple, and that's what makes it terrifying. 26 points cannot be secured simultaneously because there aren't enough forces, so they must strike at the center. The descent on Halstow is scheduled for the 3rd day. The force consists of 300 men, 8 guilds. Noon is approaching. And then Kane goes to Dallin and says that 300 men means 300 corpses. He says that what's needed down there isn't numbers, but a single person who will reach the structure. Dallin replies that it's politically impossible to send just one. He says the country is watching, that 8 guilds have already pledged their participation, and that what's at stake isn't the bridge itself, but the order of the country after the bridge. Kane looks at him and says he's deciding for everyone again. Dallin replies that someone has to. And on the evening of the second day, everything is decided without either of them. The pillars of light go out, all 26 at once. And 10 minutes later, passages open at 26 locations across the country. Not craters, passages. And from them begins to emerge what previously had not risen above the lower levels. The first reports come in from a city 40 kilometers away, then from the regional capital, then from the port. Kane looks at the map in headquarters and sees 26 markers on it and realizes that the builder lied about one of them. Not 4 days. The bridge was completed earlier. Or perhaps the bridge was never meant to be completed in its entirety. 3/4 of the way was enough to expose the supports. Phones are ringing off the hook at headquarters. Dallin is issuing orders. 8 guilds are deploying from Halstow and heading out to their assigned locations. The plan falls apart in 20 minutes. And amid the chaos, Kane walks over to the wall where Jet and Isla Ren are standing. He says he's going down now. Alone. He says there are 26 fires up there right now, and that it's pointless to put them out as long as the source is still burning. Isla Ren says the shaft is blocked by his own slab. He replies that it's not a problem. Jet says he's going with him. Kane looks at him and says no, and that this is the last time he'll say it. He says that up there, they'll need someone who can read the terrain and lead people around the danger. He says the kid is needed more here, and that this isn't consolation, but a matter of practicality. Jet looks at him and nods. He says he'll hold the exit. Kane replies that he knows. He walks toward the mine across the clearing. No one stops him because everyone has other things on their minds. At the very edge, Croy catches up to him. He's alone and without a camera. He says he saw the builder. He says this quickly, looking away. He says he cut out 12 seconds because if the country found out that a person could cross over to the other side, by morning, half the hunters would be out looking for where the choice is offered. He says he doesn't regret it. Then he says something else. He says that the 26 points are his fault too, because he signed the request to open the slab. He says they told him at the time that it was just a formality. Cain listens to him and realizes that this man didn't come here to repent. He came so that someone would know. Cain replies that down there, that doesn't count. He says that down there, the only thing that counts is what you do in the next hour. He asks what Croy is capable of. Croy replies that he can do the first stage and a 9-meter jump. Cain tells him to go to the port where the creatures came out, hold the eastern quarter, pull people out, and keep doing it as long as he can stand. He says that if he survives, they'll talk about the 12 seconds. Croy looks at him and walks over to the vehicles. Cain approaches the rubble. He picks up a slab, sets it on its edge, and pushes it aside. The shaft is open. Warm air and the smell of ash waft out of it, and that smell is more familiar to him than anything else on this site. He walks down in the dark. He left the lantern upstairs because it makes it hard to listen. At the 200-meter mark, the echo fades away. At 250 meters, the air becomes as warm milk. At 300 meters, he steps into the hall and stops on the last step. The hall has changed over the past day. The 26 circles no longer lie on the floor. They are suspended. Each circle has risen above the stone to the height of a person and is slowly rotating, and a thread of light extends from each one toward the center. The structure in the center has grown. It is no longer 7 stories tall. It is twice as high, and its top disappears into the darkness of the vaulted ceiling. Cain looks up at it from below and realizes that 3/4 was a week ago. Now it's 9/10. He steps down onto the floor and walks toward the center, counting his steps out of habit. Broken stone crunches under his feet. On the 100th step, he notices the first thing. The threads from the circles aren't steady. They're pulsing. Every thread flares brighter from time to time, and after each flare, the structure grows slightly. He stops and stares at one thread, waiting. A flare. A pause of 12 breaths. A flare. He shifts his gaze to the neighboring one. There, the pause is shorter. There, the flares come almost one after another. He looks at the third one, and it's quiet there. He stands and watches the 26 strands for 3 minutes, and something forms in his mind that sends a chill down his spine. The flashes are uneven because a battle is raging above. Where the fighting is fiercest, the strand burns more frequently. He recalls the symbols on the black stone beneath the third funnel. The inner row is filling up with those who entered. He was wrong back then about just one word. Didn't enter. Those who entered and didn't come out. The bridge counts the dead. Every person who perished upstairs at the 26 passages is counted, and the count goes to the center, and the center grows. He stands in the middle of the hall and holds on to this thought as one would hold on to something red hot. The 8 guilds have deployed to their positions. 300 committee members. An army. They're all fighting right now, and everyone who was killed completes what they came to stop. The stronger the resistance, the faster the bridge will rise. He turns toward the staircase, takes 2 steps, and stops. There's no communication upstairs. Upstairs, they won't believe him. Upstairs, Dalen is currently holding the 8 guilds, and Dalen won't withdraw them on the word of a porter without a single step. He turns back toward the structure. He makes up his mind in a single breath. If the count can't be stopped from above, it must be stopped from below. He walks toward the center, and on his 300th step, they meet him. There are 6 of them, not like last time. These are shorter and broader, packed tightly together, and each one's torso reveals a human bone. High-order collectors. Cain looks at them, takes 2 of them on, and walks right through them without stopping. He breaks the first one's hip. He knocks the second one down with his shoulder. He strikes the third one with his elbow at the base of the neck, and she crumbles on the spot. The fourth one grabs his leg, and he drags it 5 steps before finishing it off with his heel. The 5th and 6th split apart and approach from the sides. He lets them close in on him, then steps downward, causing them to collapse on top of each other. He doesn't slow his pace even once. He approaches the base of the structure, where the builder is waiting for him. The builder stands calmly. His collarbone has fused, and so have his ribs. He says he didn't think Cain would return so soon. Cain replies that the bridge counts the dead. The builder doesn't deny it. He says he doesn't count the dead, but rather what has been given. He says that life is the simplest unit a person can give, and that nothing better has been invented yet. He says there are now 26 spots up there where people are giving very generously. Cain asks how many are left. The builder replies that at the current pace, 2 days. He says that if the people up there simply left the cities, the bridge would be completed in 40 years. He says the people won't leave. He says this without malice. He speaks like a man who knows the terrain. Cain looks at him and asks the question he's been holding on to for a day. He asks why. The builder is silent for a long time. Then he says his name is Ansel Drew, and that he was the guide for the party near Hallstow 11 years ago. He says he was the first to fall. He says they found him down there on the 4th day, and that they offered him a choice, and that the choice was very simple: to serve and come up once a year, or not to serve. He says he has a 7-year-old daughter waiting for him up there. He says he agreed within 3 minutes. He says that over the past 11 years, he's come up 9 times, and that each time he stood across the street from the school and watched. He says she's all grown up now, that she has her own life, and that she doesn't know. He says that if the bridge is built, he'll be allowed to stay. Cain listens and realizes that he's not dealing with a traitor. He's dealing with a man who was given exactly what it would take for him to sell anything. He says that over the past 11 years, the man has erected 26 piers, and that beneath each pier lies a tally made up of other people's children. Ansel Drew replies that he knows. He says he stopped counting at the 4th pier because otherwise he wouldn't have been able to build the 5th. He says this matter-of-factly, his expression unchanged, and for the first time in 11 years, Cain feels truly sick to his stomach. He says he too refused to count. He says that on the 17th tier, he counted nothing but notches. He says that's what saved him, and that's what consumed him. Ansel Drew looks up. He says Cain was offered more, that Cain turned it down, and that down below, they still don't understand why. He says he's been ordered to relay the offer once more. He says they're offering him a tier in exchange, and that a tier means 300,000 souls under his command. Cain replies that he's already seen a man who took on such a tier. He says that man held it for 200 years, and that by the end, he was talking only to the walls. He says he doesn't want to talk to the walls. Ansel Drew nods as if he'd been waiting for exactly that. He says that, in that case, they'll have to fight. Cain replies that he won't fight. He says he didn't come for him. He walks around him toward the structure and places his palm on the black stone. The stone is warm, and beneath his palm it feels alive. Cain stands there for 20 breaths, listening. He spent 1,000 years learning to listen to the stone because, down below, the stone was the only thing that didn't lie. He finds what he was looking for. The load isn't going down, it's going up. The structure isn't pressing down on the floor, it's pulling. It hangs on 26 threads like a spider on a web. He removes his hand and looks up at the bridge, which is 9/10 complete, and says aloud that he understands. He says the bridge isn't supported by this stone. He says the bridge is held up by the count. He turns to Ansel Drew and says that if the count is stopped, the structure will collapse under its own weight. Ansel Drew replies that the count cannot be stopped. He says there are 26 passages up there and that enough have already passed through them that people won't be able to stop dying even if they wanted to. Kane looks at him and says the count can be closed from the other side. He says that if a single, very large entry is added to it, the row will fill up ahead of schedule and the bridge will remain unassembled. He says that an unfinished bridge collapses inward. He's seen this happen once before. For the first time during the entire conversation, Ansel Drew's expression changes. He says that for a mark like that, they give a tear down below. He says that Kane understood correctly. Kane replies that he understood long ago. He says that in 11 years up here, he never once wondered why they give 300,000 souls for a single porter. He says he knows now. He isn't a mark on the tally. He's a weight. He turns and walks toward the stairs. Ansel Drew calls after him that if he goes upstairs, there will be an army here in 2 days. Kane replies that he'll be back sooner. He says he needs 2 days to do one thing upstairs. Ansel Drew asks what it is. Kane replies that he needs to convince 300,000 people to stop dying. He climbs up. The ascent is faster than the descent. He takes a step and covers 300 meters of the mine in 4 minutes. For the last 30 meters, he once again braces his back against the sagging roof, holds his ground, and then emerges. Upstairs, it's night, and Hallstow Square is empty. Everyone has gone to their assigned locations. 3 tents, a generator, and 1 person at the gate remain. It's Verna Holt. She's sitting on a crate in an oversized jacket with a laptop on her lap, a cord running from it to the generator. She looks up and says she's been waiting for 18 hours. She says that everyone has left, that she was officially fired this morning, and that she stayed because she has nowhere else to go. Kane sits down across from her and tells her everything. He talks about the count. He talks about the threads. He says that every person who dies up there helps finish building the bridge, and that the fiercer the guilds fight, the faster the army will arrive. Verna Holt listens without interrupting. Then she closes her laptop and says that over the past 19 years, the committee has compiled 41 cases, and that not a single report mentions the word count. She says she now understands why. She says the committee treated the victims as a consequence. She says the victims weren't a consequence. They were the price. Kane asks if there's a connection to the waypoints. She replies that there's a military channel, but she doesn't have access to it. She says there's something else. She turns her laptop toward him. The screen shows a live feed from the port. The eastern quarter is on fire. The camera is shaking. In the frame, a man in a black uniform with a gold circle is seen standing alone in a breach in the wall, holding the passageway. His left arm is missing below the elbow, and his sleeve is tied off with a strap. He does not back down. Behind him, people are being led away down the street. Verna Holt says this has been going on for 4 hours. She says 11 million people are watching the footage. She says that 3 hours ago, Tobias Croy said one sentence on live TV. Kane asks what it was. She replies that he said he lied to the country about what was down there and that there was a man down there. She says that after he said that, Noon took him off the air. She says he didn't have time. She says that now that phrase is being repeated everywhere. Kane looks at the shaky footage and at the one-armed man in the gap and says aloud that he's holding the exit. Verna Holt asks what that means. Kane replies that it means he has a second one. Before dawn, they do one thing. Verna Holt opens her laptop and says she doesn't have access to the military channel, but she has something even better. She says that over the past 3 weeks, she's compiled a list of 190 people who owe her a favor. She says they include dispatchers, communications officers, 3 editors, and 1 deputy chief of the regional headquarters. She says that after 19 years at oversight, you end up with this kind of information. She starts making calls at 1 in the morning. Kane sits next to her and listens as she says the same thing 190 times. She doesn't yell. She speaks calmly and concisely and differently to each person. To one, she mentions his brother, who was imprisoned 7 years ago. To another, she says that he trusted her in 2012 and was right to do so. To a third, she simply says that she's never asked anyone for anything. By 4 in the morning, her voice is hoarse. By 5, she has 31 people ready to pass the message along their own channels. She says this isn't an order, it's a rumor. She says that on a night like this, a rumor travels faster than an order. The two of them draft the wording together and rewrite it 8 times. In the end, 4 lines remain. Do not hold the passageways. Do not engage in combat on the approaches. Withdraw your people and maintain a vacuum. Every casualty at a passageway works for the enemy. Verna Holt says no one will believe this. Kane replies that those who have already run out of men will believe it. By 7 in the morning, the message is sent out over 31 lines. By 9, it's being relayed at 2 regional headquarters. By 11, it's circulating online in 200 versions, half of which are distorted. By noon, the official headquarters issues a denial. What follows is a day of editing consisting of 4 clips. First clip: the port. Croy holds the breach for 8 hours, then loses consciousness and is pulled out by his own men. He comes to in the back of a truck, and the first thing he does is demand a camera. They give him a phone. He speaks on that phone for 40 seconds. He says that headquarters is lying, that he was downstairs and that there is no collective mind there. He says there's a counting machine there and that it's powered by their dead. He says he gave the order to his men to withdraw from the eastern quarter and leave it empty. He says he takes full responsibility. A truck driver posts the recording. By evening, 40 million people have watched it. Second cut: Jet. He's been in the square below the regional center for 3 days and is leading a group of 19 people through the plantings, bypassing the passageways. He reads the terrain. He looks at the tracks and tells them where not to go. He leads the group off course 3 times and gets it right all 3 times. On the second day, the foreman of the work crew, a 4th-rank officer, approaches him and asks how the kid knows. Jet replies that he was taught. The foreman asks who. Jet replies that it was a man who had returned from there. By evening, the 19 have become 40 because stragglers have joined them. Jet leads 40 people and doesn't lose a single one, though he doesn't understand how. Third cut: Isla Ren. She's at regional headquarters, and she's the only one who speaks aloud what she's heard through the grapevine. They tell her it's sabotage and panic. She stands up and says she's been going into the craters for 12 years and has learned to tell the difference between when casualties rise from combat and when they rise because someone needs the fighting to continue. She says that in the last 24 hours, her guild lost 6 men at a single passage, and that the passage has only gotten wider. They tell her she's been suspended. She leaves headquarters, gathers her 14, and says she's taking them out of the square. They tell her that's desertion, and that her contract with the South is a matter for the courts. She replies that she'll file charges against herself later. She leads her people away. Fourth cut:
Dalen. He arrives at Hallstow in the evening of the second day, alone in a car without security. He gets out, walks across the empty plaza, and sits down on a crate across from Kane. He says the rumor reached him 6 hours ago. He says he checked his instruments and that the data matches. He says that over the past 12 hours, where the people were evacuated, the structure's growth has slowed by a factor of 4. He says he has already issued an evacuation order through his channels. He says that 8 guilds won't obey him because, for them, evacuation is a disgrace. Then he is silent for a minute. Then he says what he came for. He says that 19 years ago, a party of 9 people went missing near a settlement 200 kilometers from here. He says only one returned. He says that was him. Kane looks at him and doesn't move. Dalen says he stayed down there for 4 months by Earth time. He says that down there, it was 11 years. He says he was given a choice, that he refused, and that they let him go. He says he still doesn't know why they let him go. He says it was most likely because he was useless. He says he returned with gray hair at the age of 28 and with the ability to read no instruments at all. He says that over the course of 19 years, he's documented 41 incidents and that he's never once sent a rescue party down. He says he wrote that note himself and that he remembers every word in it.
He says that's how he reasoned back then. If he sent rescuers, each party would mean 9 new people down there and 9 new employees 10 years later. He says he decided not to feed them. He says that in 19 years, he never once doubted this calculation until yesterday. Kane asks what changed yesterday. Dalen replies that yesterday he learned that the count is based on the dead. He says that for 19 years, he believed he wasn't feeding them. He says that all these years he has been feeding more generously than any rescuer because people died with every encounter, and he recorded them in his reports as acceptable losses. He says that 41 cases amount to 430 people. He states this figure matter-of-factly and remains silent for a long time afterward. Then he says he isn't asking for forgiveness and that he came for something else. He asks what Kane needs. Kane replies that he needs 24 hours of silence. He says that for 26 passages, no one must die for 24 hours. He says that then the count will stop and the structure will freeze at 9/10. Dalen asks what happens next. Kane replies that next, he'll go down and settle the score himself. Dalen looks at him and says he understands. He asks at what cost. Kane replies that the cost is down there. Dalen doesn't ask again. He stands up and walks toward the car, turning around halfway there. He says he won't take on the 8 guilds himself. He says he'll take the army, the committee, and 3 regions. He says that'll be enough for 21 out of 26 passes. He says the remaining 5 are the port, 2 cities, and 2 districts controlled by the major guilds. He says they won't listen to him there. Kane replies that Croy will close the port. Dalen asks about the other 4. Kane says he'll go himself. He sets out at night. Verna Holt drives the car. In 17 hours, they visit 4 locations. At the first one, they won't let him speak, so he takes 1/100th of a share and places his palm on the armored door of the command car, and the door bulges outward. After that, they let him speak. At the second location, they listen to him but don't believe him, so he asks to be escorted to the passageway. He goes there alone and stands in front of it for 20 minutes without raising his hands. During that time, no one emerges from the passageway. He explains that they won't move forward until he counts the loot. They half believe him and move the people back a kilometer. That's enough. In the third group, a man from the south is in charge, and he refuses immediately. He says he won't take orders from a fugitive porter with a marked card. Then Verna Holt opens her laptop and shows him a recording from the port where one-armed Tobias Croy speaks for 40 seconds into someone else's phone. The man from the south watches the recording twice. Then he gives the order to withdraw. He doesn't explain why to his men. At the fourth location, they're 2 hours late. Everything is already over there. They see a field, and lying on the field are 109 people. Kane stands over the field, staring, and says nothing for 10 minutes. Verna Holt says that the threads from this point are now burning like a torch. Kane replies that he knows. They return to Hallstow by evening on the third day. The clearing is no longer empty. There are 4 vehicles and a tent there. Jet Marlowe is sitting by the tent, with Isla Wren and her 14 men beside him. Jet jumps up and says he led 40 people to the evacuation point, handed them over, and returned. He says he didn't ask for permission. Isla Wren says she's been declared a deserter and that she doesn't care. Kane looks at them, at the tent, and at the generator, and realizes that he now has 18 people at this site who came here on their own. He can't remember the last time anyone came to him of their own accord. He says he'll go down in 10 hours. He says he'll go down alone. And then Isla Wren says no. She says that since his last ascent, the mine has been held together by a promise, and that if the roof collapses at 300 meters, he'll be tracked down there forever. She says a support crew is heading down. She says she's been doing exactly this for 12 years, and that it's her job, not his. Kane opens his mouth. Jet speaks before he can. He says someone has to hold the exit. It takes 10 hours to prepare for the descent, and the sequence is edited together from 4 takes. Take 1. The mine. Isla Wren descends with 6 people and works for 8 hours straight. She installs struts in 4 areas where the roof has sagged and, at the 200-meter mark, secures a steel frame under the roof. She climbs back up, covered in dust, and says the shaft will hold for 2 days, but no longer. She says the rock is wet at the 300-meter mark, and that's bad. Kane asks how bad. She replies that if something collapses down below, the shaft will cave in from top to bottom in a minute. She says this calmly and matter-of-factly, and doesn't suggest calling off the descent. Second cut.
Jet. He isn't sleeping. He's pacing around the site, checking the same things over and over, 4 times each. Kane finds him by the generator at 3 in the morning and sits down next to him. Jet says he doesn't know what to do when it's all over. He says he spent 4 years as a 7-stripes scumbag, and that in just 1 month he's become a man whom 40 grown men listen to. He says he's afraid this isn't his own, that it belongs to someone else. Kane replies that there's no such thing as someone else's. He says that over 1,000 years he's seen power given away for free, and that 100 years later, all that remained were walls that people talked to. He says that what the boy took for himself, no one will take away. Then he says something else. He says that if he doesn't return, Jet must remember 3 things. Read the land, keep an exit open, and don't answer when someone calls your name. Jet says he doesn't want to hear this. Kane replies that you have to listen to exactly what you don't want to hear. Third cut. Verna Holt. She's sitting in a tent writing all night. She's compiling 41 cases, Dalen's note, the account diagram, Croy's testimony, and her own measurements into a single document. She says it's 70 pages long and that no publisher will take it. Kane asks, "Then what's the point?" She replies that in 20 years, someone will dig through the archives and find it. She says that for 19 years, the committee wrote only for themselves, and that she'll write for others. She sends the file to 11 addresses and 3 paper copies to 3 different cities. She closes her laptop and says that now she doesn't care what happens to her.
Fourth cut. Cain himself. He walks to the edge of the site and works for 4 hours. He checks the switch. He walks 100 steps without leaving a trace, takes a quarter share, and returns in a single breath. He does this 300 times. Then he does something else. He takes 8 shares, holds them, and doesn't strike. He just holds them. He stands there with 8 shares for 60 breaths, and around him the rubble melts and the concrete cracks within 10 steps, and he does nothing. This turns out to be harder than any fight. He's never tried holding so many without striking. Down there, it was pointless. Down there, taking a share meant striking. He brings it up to 120 breaths, and after that, he plops right down on the ground and can't unclench his fists for 10 minutes. And then a realization comes to him, one he'll later consider the most important of the entire 1,000 years. He'd always measured himself by what he could destroy. The measuring column measured by the same standard and therefore showed 0. And down there, they measured him by that too, which is why they gave him a tier. Everyone focused on one side, and only he himself had been working on the other side for the past month, calling it a leash, and thinking it was a weakness and an annoying hindrance. He sits on the gravel, looks at his hands, and thinks that the leash is his true strength. Not the blow. Control. He gets up and goes into the tent and tells Dalen that he needs a plan, not for a fight. Dalen arrived at 4 in the morning and brought data on the diversion. He says that over 19 hours of silence, the structure's growth has dropped to almost 0. He says that 20 points are empty and that no one is coming out of them because there's nothing to count. He says that the 5th checkpoint is the field marked 109. He says it's already been paid for. He unfolds the map and points it out. He says that according to measurements, the structure is at 9/10 and is missing 1/10. He says that 1/10, according to their calculations, is about 3,000. Cain asks, 3,000 of what? Dalen replies, people. He says this and turns away. Then he says the most important part. He says that if Cain includes himself in the count will close instantly, and the bridge will collapse, and with it, everything within the radius will collapse as well. He says that according to their calculations, the radius is between 8 and 40 kilometers, and that they can't be any more precise than that. He says that Hallstow is empty and that 30 kilometers away there's a city of 80,000 people. Cain looks at the map. He says that means he can't include himself in the count. Dalen replies that this is the only known way. Cain says there's a second way. He says the bridge hangs on 26 cables and that these cables support its weight. He says that if they relieve the load on the cables and take it upon themselves, the structure won't collapse but will settle. He says it will settle slowly, and then there won't be a radius.
Dalen looks at him and says that, according to their estimate, the weight of this structure is about 4 million metric tons. Cain replies that he knows. He says he once held a 9 metric ton slab with just his back, and that was at half a share. Dalen does the math in his head, and his face turns gray. He says that 4 million is all the shares combined. Cain says that's not all. He says that a share is his unit of measurement, and that he divided himself into 1,000 because 1,000 was the only number he knew how to count. He says he's never checked how many shares are actually inside him. He says that on the 17th tier, there was never a reason to take it all. Dalen asks what would happen if he took it all. Cain replies that he doesn't know. He says that the body has been gathering for 1,000 years under pressure from the lords, and that he has never once reached the edge. He says that everything has an edge except for one thing.
Delenn asks, "Except for what?" Kane replies, "Except for the desire to return home." He says this matter-of-factly, and Delenn doesn't know what to say. The descent is scheduled for 6 in the morning. Half an hour before, a car pulls into the yard. Tobias Croy gets out. He's in civilian clothes. His left sleeve is rolled up and pinned. He walks slowly across the yard. Everyone stares at him, and no one greets him. He approaches Kane and says that the port is holding and that the eastern quarter has been empty for 3 days. He says that noon removed him from the team at 4 a.m. today. He says the Foundation has sued him for damage to its business reputation. He says he doesn't care. Then he explains why he came. He says he signed the request to open the slab under Halstow. He says he wants to go down there. Kane replies that he won't be of any use down there. Croy says he knows. He says he doesn't need to be useful. He says he needs to be where he signed up to be. Kane stares at him for a long time. Then he says 4 of them are going down. Himself, Isla Ren for backup, and Croy for the reason he came. And Delenn. Delenn looks up. Kane says the note was written in his handwriting and that 430 is his number. He says the boy has been counting from above for 19 years and will now count from below. Delenn stands up and says he's ready. Jet steps forward and says that makes him the 5th. Kane replies that no, he won't, and says this is the last time. He says the kid is holding the exit. He says that if the shaft gives way, someone has to stay up top to pull them out. Jet stands there in silence, then nods, the hardest nod of his life. They descend at 6:05. The 300 meters take 40 minutes because they're moving slowly, and Isla Ren checks every strut. At the 250-meter mark, the echo disappears, and Croy stops and says he can't hear his own breathing. Delenn replies that it's beginning. On the last step, they emerge into the hall, and 3 of the 4 see it in its entirety for the first time. 26 rings hang and rotate, and all the threads glow dimly, barely pulsing. The diversion is working. The structure hangs over them at 9/10, its top lost in the darkness. Isla Ren says it's impossible to build something like this. Delenn says it wasn't built. He says it was grown over 19 years. And then Ansel Drew steps out toward them from the base of the structure. He is alone. He looks at the 4 of them and says he was expecting 2. Then he looks at Delenn and says he remembers him. He says he saw his face in the papers down below. He says there's a list of those who refused and that the list is very short. Delenn replies that he knows about the list. Ansel Drew says that in that case, he must know a second thing as well. He says that those who refused aren't forgotten down there. He says that over the past 19 years, they've come for Delenn 11 times and never succeeded. He says that this time, they will succeed. Kane steps forward and says the conversation is over. He says he's going to the threads. Ansel Drew replies that he won't let him. And at that moment, 26 threads flare up simultaneously throughout the hall. The flash lasts 3 breaths, and afterward, the room is as bright as day. Kane looks at the fuses, counts them, and sees that 25 are lit. The 26th is dim. He locates it with his eyes and, based on its direction, realizes where it's coming from. The port. Delenn says that can't be because all the points have been secured. Croy replies that it is possible. He says there's still a warehouse at the port with people in the basement, and that he himself ordered it not to be opened until morning. He says morning began an hour ago. Kane looks at the threads and realizes that people are dying somewhere upstairs right now, and that the countdown has started again. He says there's no time. Ansel Drew stands between them and the structure and says that no one has time. He raises his hand, and the pressure descends on the room once more. Kane places his palm against it and holds it. He tells the others to move toward the threads along the wall. Isla Ren takes Croy by his good arm and pulls him along. Dalen follows third. Ansel Drew turns his head to look after them, and the pressure shifts, pinning the three of them to the floor. And then Kane takes 4 shares and strikes. He doesn't strike him. He strikes the floor between them, and the floor collapses in a funnel-shaped hole 20 paces wide, and the pressure breaks. The 3 get up and walk away along the wall. Ansel Drew turns to Kane and says that now it's just the 2 of them. What follows is a fight Kane didn't want. Ansel Drew is faster than last time. He's grown over the past week, and Kane understands why. He's grown on the same score. He's part of the structure. They meet at the base and exchange 12 blows in 4 seconds. Kane breaks his forearm, and the forearm reforms from black stone. He breaks it a second time, and it reforms again. He takes a step back and realizes he can't finish him off as long as the bridge stands. He lands 6 blows, causing the arch above them to crack and stone to fall from above. He strikes 6 times in a row, and on the 6th, Ansel Drew drops to one knee. He gets up slowly and says that Kane hits well and that in 11 years he hasn't seen anyone better. He says Kane should have agreed. He says that with the tear, he would have been twice as strong. Kane replies that with the tear, he would have been the tear. Meanwhile, the 3 reach the first thread. Isla Ren looks at it and says it's neither a rope nor a cable, and there's nothing to grab onto. Dalen replies that there's no need to grab onto it. He points to the loop beneath the thread. He says the loop is a knot, and that if they break the knot, the thread will snap. Croy asks what they should use to break it. Dalen replies, a blow. Croy looks at his single arm and says he has 9 meters and the first step. He approaches the hanging loop and strikes it. The circle dims by half, and the thread above it fades and then flares up again. Dalen says that 1 blow isn't enough and that they need to keep at it. Isla Ren says that in that case, they need people. She takes out her radio and calls up, but the radio is silent. She says there's no signal. And then people start coming down the ladder from above. Jet Marlowe leads the way. Behind him are 14 members of the Stone Seam. Behind them is Verna Holt. Jet reaches the floor and says he held the exit for 4 hours and that during that time, people showed up from above. He says that 200 people from 3 regions arrived at the Halstow site overnight. He says they include those Verna Holt called, those who read her file, and those he brought out from under the regional center. He says he was told to pass on one message. He says they're holding the exit upstairs and that only those needed downstairs will come down. Isla Ren looks at her 14 and doesn't waste a second. She divides them into circles, 1 per circle. She tells them to strike and not to stop. 26 circles and 16 people. She counts and says they're 10 short. Delen says it'll be enough if they strike in turn, in the correct order. He traces a diagram on the floor with his finger in the dust. He explains that the threads bear the weight unevenly, and that if they're cut in a specific sequence, the load will shift and the structure will begin to collapse on its own. He says he calculated this overnight. He says the probability is 40%. Isla Ren replies that she'll take the 40. The work begins. 16 people strike the rings on Delen's command. Isla Ren keeps track of the count aloud. Jet is working on 3 rings, running back and forth between them, and within 10 minutes his knuckles are bloodied. Croy strikes with one hand and, after each blow, squats down and stands back up. Verna Holt doesn't know how to strike, so she does something else. She stands next to Delenn, holds his diagram, and repeats the commands when he can't be heard. The structure begins to settle in the 15th minute. She sinks slowly and almost imperceptibly, and a low rumble ripples through the entire hall from this movement. Ansel Drew senses it first. He breaks off the fight, turns toward the rings, and heads there. Kane grabs him by the shoulder, turns him back around, and they clash again. This time, Kane lands 8 strikes. He doesn't strike. He does what he's been practicing for 4 hours on the training floor. He takes an 8-count grip, holds it, wraps his arms around Ansel Drew, pins his arms to his body, and stands his ground. He holds him like a log. Ansel Drew struggles but can't budge, saying it's stupid and that he needs to strike. Kane replies that hitting is useless as long as the bridge is still standing. He says he'll hold him. They stand like that for 8 minutes, and during those 8 minutes, 9 circles go out. On the 10th circle, something happens that no one is prepared for. A crack opens at the very base of the sagging structure, and they emerge from the crack. There aren't many of them. There are 7, but each one is twice as tall as the ones from last time. Dalen sees them and shouts to continue the suppression order. Ayla Wren and her team engage the first creature. The 4 of them hold it off for 20 seconds and lose one of their own. The second one heads for the circle where Jet is standing. Jet sees it and does what he's been doing all week. He reads the terrain. From its tracks, he can tell it's not out hunting, but feeding, and that it's not targeting him, but the circle. He steps aside, lets it pass, and strikes it in the knee joint just as they were taught, and it collapses. 3 others finish it off. Jet stands over it, his hands trembling, then returns to his circle and continues fighting. The third one reaches Croy. He sees her and realizes he won't have time to step back. Instead of stepping back, he takes a step forward and strikes with his one good arm at point-blank range from 9 meters. The blow hits her torso, and she stops for 2 breaths. Those 2 breaths are enough for Ayla Wren to come in from the side. Croya is knocked back 10 paces. He lies there and doesn't get up, but he's breathing. The 4th and 5th are taken out together. The 6th reaches Dalen. Dalen stands over his diagram. He's unarmed, he's not a fighter, and he never was one. He sees her, but he doesn't step away from the diagram. He shouts out the next number. He shouts it all the way through, and they manage to hear him. Ayla Wren will later say that he called out the 21st round, and that after that, he was gone. Kane sees this from across the hall. He's holding Ansel Drew at 8 counts and watches as the man who's been counting from above for 19 years stays put for the sake of a single number. He doesn't let go of the hold. He can't let go. He stands there, holding on, and it's the hardest thing he's done in 1,000 years. The 21st circle goes out 40 seconds after Dalen's death. Next comes the 22nd, the 23rd. The structure settles faster, the rumble grows fainter, and a stone falls from the ceiling. Ayla Wren shouts for everyone to head for the stairs. People are leaving. 3 burning circles remain, and there's no one left to tend to them. And then, Kane lets go of Ansel Drew. He lets him go and says he can leave. He says his daughter is 23 years old and lives in the regional center, and that a passage opened there 3 days ago. He says he doesn't know if she's alive. He says that if Ansel Drew wants to find out, he needs to go up, not down. Ansel Drew stands there in silence. Then he turns and walks away from the stairs. He walks toward the burning circle. He approaches it and places both palms on it. He says he set them up 11 years ago and that he knows how to remove them. The circle beneath his hands begins to fade, and as it does, he himself begins to glow. Kane realizes what he's doing and says a single word. Ansel Drew replies that his daughter shouldn't have to live under a bridge. He says that this is the only thing he can still give her. The circle fades. Ansel Drew sinks to the floor and doesn't move anymore. 2 circles remain. 2 circles hang 30 paces apart and burn evenly. The hall empties. Isla Ren leads the people toward the stairs, drags Croy along, turns around, and yells at Kane to go. He doesn't move. He looks up. The structure has sagged by a third and now hangs on 2 threads, both stretched so tight that the air trembles. He calculates quickly. If he extinguishes both circles at the same time, the bridge will collapse all at once, resulting in what Dallin was talking about, the radius. If he extinguishes only one, the second thread won't hold the weight for even a second, and the result will be the same. So he can't extinguish them. That means he has to remove the weight. He walks toward the center. Jet catches up to him in the middle of the hall. The boy grabs his jacket and says there's only one staircase leading upstairs and that it will collapse in a minute. Kane replies that he knows. He tells him to go. Jet says he won't go. And then Kane does what he's been putting off for a month. He tells him the whole truth. He says that for 1,000 years down there, he fought every day, and that in 1,000 years, he never once thought about going home because he didn't remember home. He says he remembered only one word. He says that a month ago, he stepped out onto the wet grass, and the first thing he felt was the wind without ash. He says that a month ago, he had nothing but a bone with notches on it. He says that now he has a young boy who brought him a second mattress, a woman who secured his shaft, and a one-armed fool who signed his name in the wrong place. He says he held himself in a fist for 1,000 years so he wouldn't go mad, and that now he finally knows why he held on. He says that whoever knows how to hold on also knows how not to let go. He tells Jet to go upstairs and hold the exit one last time. Jet stands there for 3 breaths. Then he says he'll hold it. He turns and runs. Kane approaches the structure. He stands exactly between the 2 threads, raises his hands, and presses his palms against the black stone. He says aloud that he's taking it, and he takes it all. He's never done this before. For 1,000 years, he divided himself into parts because parts can be counted, but the infinite cannot. He lets go of the count. The first thing he feels isn't strength. He feels the weight leaving him. His body ceases to be heavy. The floor beneath him cracks in a circle 40 paces wide and sinks into his palm. The second thing he feels is the structure. 4 million metric tons settle onto his palms, shoulders, and spine, down into his legs and through his legs into the stone. He accepts this weight and stands. Both strands sag. The circles above them dim because they have nothing left to hold. He stands, holding up the bridge, and it is very quiet in his head. He thinks about how, in 1,000 years, he has never once stood so long without moving. He thinks about how, down below, he was measured by how much he could break. The measuring column measured by the same standard. And now he's bearing 4 million metric tons on his own and isn't breaking anything. And this is the first time no one is measuring him. He holds it. The circles fade on their own. First one, after 20 breaths, the second. The strands snap and hang limp, then are drawn into the stone. And then the structure begins to settle for real. It sinks slowly, bearing its full weight, and all that weight passes through him. He drops to one knee, then to the other. He holds it. He lowers his head, bracing the back of his head against the ground, and holds it. He feels the floor giving way beneath him, the stone beneath his knees crumbling to dust, and the rock pressing him into the bedrock up to his thigh. He doesn't let the bridge fall. He lets it lie down. This lasts 19 minutes. He counts his breaths and loses count at 900. At some point, he realizes there's nothing left to stand on, and that he's holding up 4 million metric tons while standing inside them. And at that moment, inside him, what he had been holding onto for 11 years lets go. He ceases to be the man who is afraid of breaking a cup. He simply holds on. The bridge collapses at 28 minutes past 3. It collapses entirely, spreading across the hall and filling it, and a wave emanates from it that flows downward rather than upward. Half the hall collapses 90 meters, along with everything inside it. Kane falls downward along with the rock. Up on the Hallstow platform at that moment, 200 people feel a jolt. It comes from below, and it is alone, and after it, everything goes quiet. The shaft collapses in 40 seconds, from 300 meters to 50. Jet Marlowe emerges from it at the 52nd second along with the last 3, and the platform sinks beneath his feet. He turns around and looks at the sealed shaft, standing motionless for 2 hours. 4 months pass, and the story unfolds through montages. First cut. 26 passages are sealed off within a day. Not all at once, they collapse one after another, starting with the farthest one and ending with the port. 2 people manage to escape from the last one and are captured within an hour. Nationwide casualties over 9 days total 4,200 people. A commission will later estimate that under the original defense plan, the death toll would have been around 70,000. Second scene, Verna Holt. Her report is published in 3 editions 11 days later. For the first 2 weeks, it's dismissed as a hoax. On the 15th day, one of the 11 recipients publishes a signed memo from 19 years ago. After that, something else begins. The committee is disbanded 4 months later. 41 cases are reopened. Verna Holt is summoned to appear before a parliamentary commission, and she agrees. At the first hearing, she utters a single sentence that is repeated for a long time afterward. She says that for 19 years, these were considered acceptable losses, and that there is no such thing as an acceptable loss, because someone always treats them as currency. Third scene, Tobias Croy. He survives. He loses his rank permanently because what he did at the port cost him the hand he used to fight with. He is left with 1 hand and no rank. Polden goes to trial against him for 11 months and loses after Isla Ren testifies. He does not return to the guild. He opens an agency that handles a single type of case. It tracks down those who have gone missing in the vortexes over the past 19 years and secures their official recognition as deceased or missing in action, with compensation paid to their families. In 2 years, he closes 260 cases. He never gives a single interview. Fourth segment, Isla Ren. The contract with Noon is cancelled, along with the fund. She revives Stonescene, and the guild now has 29 members. She makes the rule she writes herself the first line of the charter. Either everyone comes out of the vortex, or no one does. She becomes the go-to person for those not accepted into the major guilds. A year and a half later, she has 110 members. Fifth segment, Jet Marlowe. He reaches the 4th rank in 7 months and the 5th in a year. He doesn't join any of the major guilds. He works for Isla Ren and trains the newcomers. He teaches them 3 things: how to read the ground, how to keep an escape route open, and not to answer when called by name. Every time he's asked where he learned the rules, he replies that he was taught them. He doesn't give a name. He places a stone at the Hallstow site and visits it once a month. Nothing is written on the stone. A year and 2 months pass. At the end of September, a crew arrives at the Halstow site to permanently fill the sinkhole with concrete. The work takes 4 days. On the morning of the 5th day, the foreman finds a breach in the rock at the bottom of the sinkhole, 50 meters deep. A breach that wasn't visible in the survey the day before. The breach extends upward from below, leading out into the open. Another 6 hours later, 20 kilometers from Halstow on a country road, a farmer spots a man walking from the north. The man has no shoes. He's wearing the tattered remains of a black jacket, and he's walking barefoot on the gravel without limping. The farmer stops his car and offers him a ride. The man gets in and says he's headed to town. The farmer later recounts that for 40 minutes, the passenger didn't say a word other than that and spent the entire ride looking out the window at the fields. The farmer also mentions something strange. He says that when the passenger got out and closed the door behind him, he did so carefully, as if the door were made of glass. Kane Welt walks into town at 6 in the evening. He walks along the sidewalk, surrounded by people coming home from work, and no one looks at him. He stops in the middle of the street, stands there for a minute, and listens. He hears cars and voices and a spoon clattering in a cafe. He doesn't hear a single sound that could be considered a threat. He keeps walking. He reaches the outskirts and finds a low building there with a sign for the Small Guild, and in the courtyard of that building, 12 people are training under the command of a guy in his 20s with 5 stripes on his shoulder. Kane stops at the fence and looks through the mesh. He watches as the young man corrects one of the new recruits' foot placement. He hears the young man say that you have to step with the ball of your foot and that this is how everyone walks on a collapsed archway. Kane stands by the fence and listens to his own words coming from someone else's mouth. Then the guy looks up and sees him. He freezes. He stands there for a very long time, not moving or saying a word. Then he walks over to the gate and opens it. He doesn't ask where Kane had been. He doesn't ask how. He just says they have a free bunk, that it's by the window, and that there's a draft there. Kane steps into the yard. He walks 12 steps across the gravel to the porch. He lands on the ball of his foot, distributes his weight, and walks softly, just as he trained himself to do a whole month, or rather, a little over a year ago. He steps onto the porch and turns around. Not a single footprint remains behind him on the gravel.